Chapter 1823. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone was surprised to learn that Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue were planning to leave Yuntian Tower and head to Peach Blossom Cove. Rong Xiao only said that Yuntian Tower was the place where they pledged their love to each other. Now that they were getting married, they wanted to go back and take a look. This explanation made sense, so no one continued to pursue the matter. However, why is Enchanting going too? Crack. Little Hachi broke the hairpin in her hand with a murderous look. Yujio silently put away his wooden sword, afraid that she would break his sword in a fit of anger. It hadn't even been a few days. Sister 8, since His Highness the Son of Saint is going with our master, he naturally has to bring someone with him. Enchanting is his confidant. Isn't that normal? Moreover, Peach Blossom Cove was a dangerous place with all kinds of people. It would be more convenient to bring someone with him. That's right. Compared to our master who brought so many people, His Highness the Son of Saint brought only Enchanting, which is already very little. Besides, I heard that Enchanting is quite powerful. Maybe he can be of help at a critical moment. Wu Yao asked as he packed his luggage. By the way, little Hachi, didn't you challenge him before? How was it? It was fine if he didn't mention this. Little Hachi was instantly enraged when she heard this. Her beautiful eyes were burning with anger. That Enchanting is not a man at all. Shi Fang, who was carefully putting away the vegetables he planted, finally raised his head and asked hesitantly, Sister 8. You tried? Chi. Little Hachi threw the broken hairpin in her hand out. The sound of something breaking through the air was heard. Shi Fang quickly dodged, picked up his vegetables, and ran away. Little Hachi let out a long breath and snorted. I didn't fight with him that day. Originally, she wanted to reason with him. Of course, her reasoning was basically to fight. However, when she saw Enchanting, he refused to fight no matter what she said. From the beginning to the end, he had no intention of fighting with her. He didn't even bother to talk to her. In Enchanting's eyes, little Hachi was just a willful girl. He had always been cold-hearted, so of course, he didn't want to argue with her. He also didn't want to waste his time. Unfortunately, in little Hachi's eyes, this was an open eye. Hence, this grudge was completely formed. Wu Yao wasn't of his. You are master's person. If he hits you, what if you go back and complain to master about it? In my opinion, this Enchanting is rather smart. Women were two's eyes of the most. Little Mina squinted his eyes dangerously, then suddenly revealed an enchanting smile. Anyway, there are plenty of opportunities along the way. Do you think I'm afraid of him? Sunny pushed open the door. Let's go. Peach Blossom Cove was thousands of miles away from the Yuntian Tower. They had to pass through several teleportation formations. Even if everything went smoothly, it would take at least 10 days. Their speed wasn't considered slow on the way. Chu Luiyue was initially worried about the 13 UU. After all, traveling like this was very tiring. But soon, she realized that she was overthinking. Even little 13, who had the lowest cultivation level, didn't fall behind. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. But after thinking about it, the 13 UU had probably trained themselves after running around on their own for the past few years. Although these people's cultivation levels had increased, it wasn't obvious. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue still felt that their strength in all aspects seemed to have increased a lot. As they had been rushing, Chu Luiyue didn't ask in detail. About 13 days later, they finally arrived at Peach Blossom Cove. When they came out of the teleportation formation, they saw a desolate wasteland. On the wasteland, the ground was cracked and ravines crisscrossed. In front of them, a huge transparent light screen descended from the sky. On the other side of the light screen, there was a completely different scenery. There was a continuous mountain range, and large patches of pink peach blossoms spread out. It was a scene full of vitality. But looking at it like this, it was hard to believe that it was a dangerous place. At this moment, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu's group were not the only ones on the teleportation formation. This teleportation formation was very big. Although it had been there for a long time, and there were traces of time, it was still working well. There were all kinds of people around the teleportation formation. At a rough glance, there were at least 100 people. When they appeared, they immediately attracted the attention of these people. This time, Chu Luiyue brought a few people from the 13 Yu, while Rong Xiu only brought Qing. However, there were already 9 people. Their sudden appearance here was quite eye-catching. Most importantly, the auras of this group of people were simply too extraordinary. Anyone with a bit of eyesight could tell that they were of noble birth and were definitely not ordinary people. This kind of temperament could only be cultivated by a top-notch aristocratic family. When those people's judgmental and suspicious gazes landed on her, Chu Luiyue was also quietly sizing up her surroundings. Among them, there were a few obscure and powerful auras that attracted her attention. A chill suddenly rose from the bottom of her feet. However, when Chu Luiyue wanted to take a closer look, that sense of danger disappeared. Those few gazes disappeared almost at the same time, and there was no way to investigate. Chu Luiyue looked around without batting an eyelid. However, the people around her quickly retracted their gazes. In fact, those who chose to come to Peach Blossom Cove were not simple people. There were all kinds of people arriving here every day. There were destitute aristocratic young masters, and extremely vicious fugitives. There were beautiful girls, and also old people who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Therefore, although the appearance of Chu Luiyue and the others attracted some people's attention, it was only for a short time. Everyone's first priority here was to enter Peach Blossom Cove and survive. Let's go. Rong Xiu raised his chin, held Chu Luiyue's hand, and walked forward. The group of people followed. The teleportation formation was not far from the light screen, so it did not take them too long to reach the light screen. Chu Luiyue exhaled softly. She did not expect to come here again in her lifetime. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1824. The light screen of Peach Blossom Dock was naturally formed and completely enveloped it. On the other side was the gate of the Divine Ruins world. No one was in charge of guarding this place. Standing close, one could see the ripples on the light screen. When the breeze blew, one could even smell the faint fragrance of peach blossoms in the air. This aura was simply too familiar. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and exchanged glances with Rong Xiu. Then, they stepped in hand. The moment they entered, 13 couldn't help but exclaim in shock. What rich energy of heaven and earth! After saying that, perhaps because he realized that he was making a fuss over nothing, 13 immediately covered his mouth and a trace of embarrassment appeared on his face. Chu Luiyue glanced at him with a smile. You're right. The energy here is indeed shockingly rich. It wasn't inferior even to the Yuntian Tower. This was also the reason why so many people wanted to take this place for themselves at the very beginning. This Peach Blossom Dock was indeed a treasured place for cultivation. That is, if one ignored the turbulent space turbulence. It was precisely because of this that Peach Blossom Dock hadn't been truly taken over by any faction. In fact, no one had any plans for it anymore. This further proved how dangerous this place was. It could only be said that it was a pity. But this place is filled with danger. You must follow me and not be left behind. The few of them nodded. Chu Luiyue looked ahead. This was a very wide street. There were all kinds of shops on both sides of the street. Many people came and went on the street. It was very lively. A trace of surprise flashed past Chu Liyue's eyes. This peach blossom dock seemed to be a little different from before. When she came here in the past, the scene was far from being so peaceful. But now, what was going on? Chu Liyue looked at Rong Xiao and saw the same suspicion in his eyes. However, the two of them didn't say anything and tacitly swallowed their doubts. "Cini, do you know where Sanson's shop is?" Chu Liyue turned and asked. Cini shook his head. He didn't mention this before. Moreover, they didn't have time to tell Sanson that they were coming over this time. He probably didn't know yet. Chu Liyue was a little troubled. That's a little troublesome. The Peach Blossom Cove was huge. It would take a lot of effort to find a single person. Cini, why don't you and His Highness find a place to rest first? When we find him, we'll report to you. Chu Liyue thought for a while. All right, take Weiyao with you. She looked around her. We'll wait in the medicine shop. Perhaps he could also find out more about this place. Yes. Cini and Weiyao responded, quickly leaving. Chu Liyue and his group turned around and entered the medicine store. After entering, Chu Liyue realized that the shop was much bigger than they had expected. From the outside, this place was just a small storefront, unremarkable. But when he came in, he realized that there was something else here. It was just that this shop seemed to have been here for a long time. There were many medicinal herbs and some pills in the shelves in the room. Sir, what would you like to see? A servant quickly came up to them. Seeing that they were well-dressed and well-spoken, his attitude became even more attentive. Rong Xiao said, "We're new here." "We are new here, so we're just looking around." "Hey! Then please take your time and watch." Rong Xiao had an innate noble aura. The servant knew that he couldn't afford to offend him, so he waited obediently at the side. Chu Liyue looked into the shelves and his eyes narrowed. "I couldn't tell that you have so many good things here," Chu Liyue said. Hearing that, a proud smile appeared on the servant's face. "Of course. You don't know, but in the entire Peach Blossom Cove, no one can compare to us." His tone wasn't small. Chu Liyue laughed. "Oh. The Peach Blossom Cove is so big. Your small shop is the best." Seeing that she didn't believe him, the servant quickly explained, "Madam, there's something you don't know. Our shop is from the past. The new shop is being renovated. We'll be moving in a few days. Moreover, we have more than one shop. We have several other shops in the Peach Blossom Cove." This made Chu Liyue curious. When did the Peach Blossom Cove have such a medicinal herb shop? One must know that there were countless fights and killings in the Peach Blossom Cove every day. Therefore, the business of medicinal herbs and pills had always been very good. However, it was also because of this that the competition between the medicinal herb shops was very fierce. Some of the smaller shops had been squeezed out. Those who were able to stay were all capable. Even so, Chu Liyue had never heard of the Peach Blossom Cove opening several medicinal herb shops. At least, when she came here in the past, there weren't any. When the servant heard her words, he smiled. "Madam, you must have been here in the Peach Blossom Cove before, but you haven't been here for a long time, right?" Chu Liyue nodded. "That's right. Actually, this shop of ours was only opened in the past year or so. It's normal that you don't know about it." Chu Liyue was even more surprised. Her eyes swept across the medicinal herbs and pills on the display, and her mind was spinning. Many of the medicinal herbs placed here were heavenly treasures that were extremely difficult to find outside. As for those medicinal pills, their grades were not low either. "Did you find all these on your own?" The servant smiled and said, "Yes. Our boss regularly delivers goods to a few shops every month, and they are all excellent items. Chu Luiyue nodded thoughtfully. Your boss is quite impressive. Digression, I took the medicine at night, but I was very sleepy. I fell asleep a few times while sitting. I guess I really can't write anymore. I'll stop here for today. Sorry, everyone. I'll make up for what I owe in a few days after the update. Love you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1825. The page boy was beaming with joy. Of course. You won't be able to find any store in the entire Peach Blossom Dock that has better medicinal herbs and elixirs than ours. Chu Luiyue believed his words a little. When she came here a few years ago, she did visit some medicinal herb stores. However, none of them could be compared to this store. She wondered who the boss behind this store was to be so generous. Although the energy of heaven and earth was abundant in Peach Blossom Dock, there were no decent heavenly treasures. There was a huge market for good medicinal herbs and elixirs, but it was also difficult to obtain them. On the one hand, one needed to have a channel to obtain these items. On the other hand, one needed to have enough power to ensure that these items could be delivered safely and sold smoothly. In the past, there were many outlaws in Peach Blossom Dock, and incidents of looting and robbing happened from time to time. One had to be strong enough to gain a foothold in Peach Blossom Dock. Chu Luiyue was a little curious about this boss. Are these medicinal herbs produced in Peach Blossom Dock? Rong Xiao suddenly asked. The page boy nodded. Yes. Moreover, they are all treasures of Qingshui Cliff. They are all top-notch. Chu Luiyue was surprised. Qingshui Cliff. She knew this place, but it was just an ordinary cliff. It was not eye-catching in Peach Blossom Dock. Why did it seem to have become a place of treasures now? Seeing her puzzled expression, the page boy explained. You may not know this, but 2 years ago, the lightning tribulation in Peach Blossom Dock happened to strike Qingshui Cliff. Qingshui Cliff was split in half, and everyone discovered that there was a small space inside it. There were countless heavenly treasures growing in it. Now, Qingshui Cliff has become the most sought-after treasure in Peach Blossom Dock. At this point, he chuckled. However, we went there early and gained an advantage. Now, this store is finally up and running. There was a small space inside Qingshui Cliff. And there were countless heavenly treasures. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao looked at each other. This was really surprising. We haven't been here for a few years, so we really don't know much about this. However, why isn't there any news about such a big thing outside? Asked Chu Luiyue after some deliberation. The page boy revealed a mysterious expression. Madam, since you've been here before, how could you not know what kind of place the Peach Blossom Cove is? Even the people of the Peach Blossom Dock don't have enough of those heavenly treasures. How could they be willing to share them with outsiders? Only those who entered the Peach Blossom Cove would know about this. Chu Luiyue thought about it and agreed. The people of Peach Blossom Cove probably wanted to keep this news a secret forever so that no outsiders would know about it. Otherwise, it would attract more people to covet and fight for it, which wouldn't do them any good. In the past, the Peach Blossom Cove did not have any treasures, so most of the aristocratic families were not willing to come here. But if word of this got out, who knew what kind of people it would attract? At this moment, Yi Axian walked in from outside the door. They were dressed in black robes with huge hoods covering almost half of their faces. Only their exceptionally pale cheeks, bright red lips, and sinister eyes could be seen. There was a strange pattern embroidered on the left side of their chests. 2 long swords intersected, reflecting a blood moon. Their murderous intent was awe-inspiring, and there was an inexplicable strangeness to it. There were a total of 4 people, and they were all dressed in the same way. When the page boy in the shop saw the arrival of these people, a trace of fear flashed across his eyes. Then, he quickly put on a warm smile and hurried forward to welcome them. "Why are you all so free today? Please forgive me for not welcoming you earlier." The man in the lead looked at him coldly. "Of course, I'm here to retrieve something." The page boy revealed a troubled expression. "Sir, there are still 3 days before the stipulated date. We're not ready yet. Why don't you wait for swoosh?" The man in the black robe did not say anything else. He directly drew the sword at his waist and stabbed it at the page boy's shoulder. The page boy was shocked and hurriedly dodged. However, he was still stabbed in the arm, and blood immediately flowed out. "This is something that our master wants. We can't delay it. Now, are you ready?" The man in the black robe's voice was cold. Several people behind him were also ready to take action. The page boy covered his wound tightly. His face was pale, but he still said, "If you want to retrieve it now, it's okay. But, we lack the spirit-melting herb. You know, this herb has always been in short supply. Not only this shop, but also other drugstores in the Peach Blossom Dock City don't have it now." The man in the black robe raised his chin. "Then, retrieve the rest first. As for the rest of the spirit-melting herb, let your boss send it to me in person 3 days later." The page boy's face was even paler. "Yes. Yes." Then, he turned around and walked to the counter. He opened the door with his other uninjured arm, took out an interspatial ring, and then handed it over respectfully. "Sir, they're all here." The man in the lead immediately stepped forward and took the interspatial ring. After checking it and confirming that there was only the spirit-melting herb inside, he put away the interspatial ring and gave the page boy a warning look. "I'll let it go this time. If the same thing happens next month, be careful of your life." After that, they turned around and left. When they walked out of the door, the man in the lead deliberately glanced at Chu Luyue and others. Chu Luyue clearly felt that the man's eyes lingered on her and Rong Xiao for a few seconds. She looked calm and pretended not to notice the man's killing intent. Rong Xiao took half a step forward, hugged her waist, and blocked that person's view. "You, see if there's anything you want to buy here." There was a short silence. Only then did those people finally leave. When they finally disappeared, the bloody and austere atmosphere faded a lot. The injured page boy forced a smile at them. "Sir, I'm really sorry." Chu Luyue winked at 13. 13 stepped forward to bandage the page boy's wound. The page boy was quite flattered and hurriedly said, "Thank you, young master. It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal." As he spoke, he took out an elixir from the cabinet and took it. Then he took out the gauze. It was a pity that he was injured in the upper arm. He couldn't treat it with one hand. "Let me help you," 13 said. Now, the page boy couldn't refuse and had to thank him in a low voice. 13 was very skilled. After a while, he helped the page boy treat the wound. Then he consciously returned to his position and stood there obediently. Chu Luyue looked at him with appreciation and praised him casually. "I didn't expect that 13 had studied it so well." Little Hachi flipped her hair and smiled charmingly. "There's no other way. What makes a coincidence?" Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1826. 13 had been trained by his big brother every day, and had suffered countless injuries. In addition, if the others were injured and couldn't deal with it themselves, they would go to 13. As time passed, the proficiency level naturally appeared. Chu Luyue, however, 13 was still very happy to be praised, and his eyes shone brightly. "Thank you." The servant walked over and bowed solemnly. Chu Luiyue shook his head. He remembered that the servant's actions were very familiar, and he even placed medicine and gauze on the counter. This wasn't the first time such a situation had happened. Who are those people? How can they be so domineering? Hearing this, the servant immediately revealed a nervous expression. He looked around and made sure that no one else heard it before he let out a sigh of relief and said bitterly, "Madam, please don't say such things in the Peach Blossom Cove in the future." What words? Can't say that those people are domineering. Chu Luiyue laughed instead. It seemed that they were really domineering, and they couldn't even listen to others calling them domineering. If the people from the Moon Sword sect heard it, the consequences would be unimaginable. Ink Sword sect. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. Why haven't I heard of it before? The servant sighed deeply. It's a long story. Actually, the Black Sword sect had only arrived a year ago. At that time, they only had a few dozen people, but each of them was very powerful, and they quickly became a famous existence in the Peach Blossom Cove. After that, they decided to settle down here, and they kept recruiting more people to join them. In just a short year, they became the most important existence in the Peach Blossom Cove. You've all seen how they do things just now. Our shop has to deliver some top-grade medicinal herbs and pills to them on time every month. If the items are not good enough, or if they are not prepared in time, we will be punished by them. The servant's voice was very low. When he said this, he subconsciously looked around, and his eyes were filled with panic and fear. It was obvious that the so-called Ink Sword sect had left a deep psychological shadow in their hearts. Chu Luiyue understood. Since it was a gift, of course, it was free. Although Chu Luiyue did not know what kind of treasures were in the interspatial ring, given the standard of the shop, it must be some top treasures of heaven and earth. Lingshao College's Medicine Wind Valley could only produce a small amount of spirit melting grass in a year. However, these people wanted it every month. If they didn't prepare it in time, their boss would have to personally deliver it to them. This is really, who is in charge of the Black Sword sect? Rong Xiao suddenly asked. The manservant's eyes revealed a hint of confusion as he shook his head. We don't know either. Normally, we would only see these lords, but as for their master, we have never seen him before. Furthermore, we do not know his identity. He has never stepped out of the Black Sword sect. It was not certain whether it was inside or not. At this point, the servant realized that he had misspoken and covered his mouth nervously, as if he was afraid that the people from the Black Sword sect would suddenly return. Chu Luiyue tilted his head and looked at Rong Xiao. He smiled thoughtfully. I didn't expect that the Peach Blossom Dock would change so much in just a few years. The Black Sword sect was not simple. For many years, countless aristocratic families and clans had tried to take root here, but they all failed. However, this Black Sword sect, which had appeared out of nowhere, had actually become the local tyrant in the short span of a year or so. In this case, the entire Peach Blossom Dock is now theirs, isn't it? The manservant hesitated. That's not entirely true. After all, many people in the Peach Blossom Dock did not like the Black Sword sect's behavior. It was just that their resistance was a little weak. Chu Luiyue nodded knowingly. It was not that easy for the Black Sword sect to take over the Peach Blossom Dock. However, they had done what many aristocratic families and clans had failed to do. If they were given more time, no one could say for sure what the result would be. The manservant thought for a while and said, "Esteemed guests. Esteemed guests, I don't know why you've come to the Peach Blossom Cove, but if you don't have any urgent matters, please leave quickly. I saw that the people from the Black Sword sect seemed to be hostile towards you. It is really dangerous here. If they did not meet the people from the Black Sword sect, it would be fine. Or if they were very ordinary and would not attract their attention, so it would be safer. However, those people were not blind. They could tell that they had a strong background. The people from the Black Sword sect would definitely find trouble with them. Chu Liyue smiled. She knew that the manservant had good intentions. However, they had just arrived. How could they just leave like this, mistress? A voice brimming with excitement suddenly came from behind. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows. Her lips were already curled into a smile. She turned around and saw a chubby little fatty dressed in a gorgeous brocade robe running towards her at high speed. Although his body was round and smooth, his movements were very agile and nimble. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of them. Chu Liyue could not help but smile. Sanson, I haven't seen you for a long time. How come you have become chubbier? When the chubby little boy heard this, he immediately rushed over excitedly. Mistress! You are finally here. Sanson has missed you so much. Rong Xiao glanced at him. Sanson suddenly felt a chill from the bottom of his heart. His strong desire to live made him stop in his tracks. He stopped 3 steps away from Chu Liyue. In the blink of an eye, he was smiling so widely that his eyes were squinted. He eagerly said to Rong Xiao, Mistress, this must be your husband, His Highness the Holy Sun. He is truly a handsome man. He is a match made in heaven with you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 1827. Any normal person could tell that he was trying to curry favor. But when these words came out of his mouth, they sounded especially sincere. He first bowed solemnly to the two of them before he straightened his body and said to Chu Liyue in admiration, Master, you're very talented. Master, I thought that there was no man in this world who was worthy of you. I didn't expect that I was so wrong. Rong Xiao raised the corner of his mouth. This Sanson really lived up to his reputation. Although she knew his intentions, his tone was like a spring breeze. It seemed that she could feel his sincerity, which made people unconsciously convinced. He was indeed good at talking. No wonder he could do well in a place like Peach Blossom Dock. Hearing Sanson's words, Chu Liyue's mouth twitched slightly. After not seeing him for a few years, his skills had really improved. She looked at Sanson up and down. It seems that you've been living a good life here. Look, your chin is about to show. Sanson chuckled and narrowed his small eyes with a shrewd light. He looked fair and soft, very amiable and likable. He really hadn't seen Chu Liyue for a long time and missed her very much. Now that he saw her and heard her familiar teasing, he only felt happy. It's all because I know that Master and His Highness are going to get married. I'm so happy that I ate a few more bowls of rice. Chu Liyue, it was the first time she heard someone talk about gluttony so confidently. Shifang nodded very seriously and said, Master, third brother is not picky about food. Every time he is in a good mood, he can eat a few more bowls of rice every meal. Unlike him, he was too picky about food and often didn't have enough to eat. Sanson's eyelids twitched. He had always been coarse and thick-skinned. He basically didn't take what others said to heart. But every time he opened his mouth, he would be ruthlessly stabbed. Shifang must be one of them. He looked at Shifang with a faint gaze. Shifang, there are many times when you don't have to speak. It was better to pretend to be mute than to say the wrong thing. Shifang shrank his neck and felt that it was dangerous, so he obediently responded. Oh. Boss. The servant at the side was already stunned and called out to Sanson in a daze. You, his eyes moved back and forth between Chu Liyue and Sanson. His own boss actually called this lady Master. Chu Liyue and the others also realized that something was wrong. Her eyes widened slightly. Sanson, this shop is yours. Sanson nodded calmly. Yeah. So Sanson was the boss. Chu Luiyue came back to his senses and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She really didn't expect. Xiao Zhao, why aren't you greeting master? Chu Luiyue was his master, and he was the boss of these people. Naturally, Chu Luiyue was also the master of these people. The manservant hadn't recovered from the shock just now. Hearing this, he hurriedly responded. Ah. Oh. Yes. Greetings, master. As he spoke, he even wanted to kneel down and salute Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue raised his hand. You're injured. No need to be so polite. Only then did Sanson notice that Xiao Zhao's arm was wrapped in gauze, and a large patch of red had been wet on it. His face became serious. The people of Black Sword Sect are here again. The manservant nodded with a bitter face. Now in the Peach Blossom Dock, there was only one family who would dare to act so brazenly against them. They also said that you should come to them in person 3 days with the spirit melting grass. Sanson's face twitched. Chu Luiyue frowned and laughed angrily. So you're saying, just now, those people snatched my things right in front of me? Digression, in a cold and dead body, 6:00 in the evening. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1828. Sensing his master's murderous intent, Sanson trembled all over. Having served his master for so long, he knew that what she hated the most was other people snatching her things away. Now, it was happening right in front of her. Ahem, master, don't be so anxious. Calm down. I'll explain it to you in detail later. Sanson chuckled as he spoke. You've come all the way here. I'm sorry for not coming out to meet you. This place is too shabby. Why don't you and His Highness take a rest at my place? He had prepared the place long ago. After all his earnings were for his master. He just didn't expect that they would come so quickly. Chu Luiyue nodded. The situation at Peach Blossom Dock was more complicated than expected. They had to calm down and understand the situation before making a decision. Let's go to your place. After taking a few steps, she glanced at the servant beside her. He's injured. Let him rest at home for a few days. Sanson hurriedly said. Ah. Okay. He waved at the servant. Xiao Zhao, it's your fortune that master asked for it personally. You can go back and rest for the next few days. You'll be paid as usual. The servant was overjoyed and quickly thanked master. Sanson was nervous and happy at the same time. He led the way while rubbing his hands and asked expectantly. Master, you and His Highness have only been married for half a month. Why are you here so soon? Is it? He originally wanted to ask if his master also missed him in his heart. However, before he could finish his sentence, he saw Rong Xiu's cold smile from the corner of his eyes. Sanson swallowed her saliva with difficulty and tactfully swallowed the rest of her words. Ahem. Master, His Highness, this way please. After the group of people left, the servant stood at the door and looked at them for a long time. Regarding that master, the boss had mentioned it many times. He didn't expect that she was such a young lady. However, judging from her elegance and temperament, she was indeed not an ordinary person. The boss's master was indeed extraordinary. Thinking back to the scene of the people from the Black Sword Sect coming here to ask for something, the servant felt a little uneasy. This master doesn't seem to be easy to deal with. I wonder if I'll end up in trouble with the Black Sword Sect this time. Chu Luiyue and the others walked towards the city. Sanson followed beside him and kept nagging. Most of them were his experiences over the past few years, as well as some trivial matters that had happened recently. Chu Luiyue was already used to this, so he listened quietly. Yes. Sanson not only likes to write letters, but also likes to talk. However, Sanson knew when to say what to say and what not to say. Just like now, he knew that this was the first time that Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu had returned to Peach Blossom Dock after a few years. Therefore, he told Chu Luiyue about the changes in Peach Blossom Dock. Suddenly, he heard that he was just chatting, but in fact, the rules were clear, and the main points were very clear. Chu Luiyue listened and nodded from time to time. Previously, when they were in the shop, the servant also said a lot, but it was all intermittent. Now that they heard Sanson's explanation, they finally connected the series of events together. The few of them stood in front of the door and looked forward. The stone lion at the door was made of pure gold, and the steps were covered with a red velvet carpet. The servants in the mansion seemed to have gathered around and respectfully lined up on both sides. "Welcome back, Master." It was a grand and imposing sight. Looking up, the pure gold plaque above did indeed have the two words, "Yu Mansion," written on it. Chu Luiyue looked at this dazzling and ostentatious mansion, and the corner of his mouth twitched again. Why is Sanson always able to exaggerate beyond my imagination? How is it? Master, do you like it? Sanson smiled until his eyes narrowed into slits. Time is of the essence, and I didn't have time to rehearse. Please forgive me. Chu Luiyue, for a moment, she really had the urge to run away. Seeing Chu Luiyue's reaction, Sanson was a little unsure. Does Master not like it? But this was a mansion that he had specially spent a lot of effort to renovate. This welcoming ceremony was also carefully designed by him. This door is so grand. This welcome is so warm. Why doesn't Master like it? Sanson's eyes turned, and he moved closer to Rong Xiu. Your Highness, what do you think? She silently glanced at Rong Xiu. Where did this inexplicable feeling of embarrassment come from? His Highness, the Holy Sun, was as gentle as jade. Dressed in white, he looked like a banished immortal. Hearing this, he gently nodded, and his jade-like chin drew a perfect arc. Not bad. It seems that you're really concerned about your master. Sanson immediately beamed with joy. Your Highness is really amazing. It's good that you two like it, it's good that you like it. Chu Luiyue, Rong Xiu looked sideways at her, and his thin lips curled into a smile that almost rippled to the corners of his eyes. It seems that 13th you treats you extremely well. Chu Luiyue, let's go in and take a look. As Rong Xiu spoke, he had already pulled her hand and walked inside. Sanson followed him happily. Little Hachi glared fiercely at the two pure gold lions. Big brother, can I not go in? This place is so ugly. So ugly. Xin Yi's expression was indifferent. He straightened his clothes and followed directly. Sure. Sanson has a few other courtyards. You can go and take a look. Anyway, they were all of this standard. When little Hachi thought about how her eyes still had to be tortured a few more times, she suddenly felt that life was hopeless. If I really sleep in a place like this, my dress will be dull. As she spoke, she turned to leave. Stay at the inn, stay at the inn. Unexpectedly, as soon as she turned around, she saw a sturdy and muscular figure. She was caught off guard and directly bumped into him. Hey! Just as she was about to bump into the other party's arms, the figure in front of her suddenly stepped to the side and dodged. Dodged. Little Hachi's body fell uncontrollably to the ground. She widened her eyes. Is there something wrong with this person? If she fell to the ground like this, her reputation would be ruined. Just as she was thinking about how to fall more beautifully, a strong force suddenly came from the side. A broad and rough palm pulled her slender and smooth arm and pulled her back. With this force, little Hachi finally managed to stand firm. With this struggle, a string of broken jade beads on her wrists and ankles made a messy sound. She turned her head back in shock. Enchanting had already let go of his hand. Little Hachi widened her big charming eyes. You! Why were you dodging just now? It was as if he was afraid that she would do something. Enchanting frowned. After all, the other party was a girl. If they bumped into each other, it would be really inappropriate with so many people watching. Was it wrong for him to take the initiative to step aside? Besides, he didn't let her fall. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 1829. However, looking at the angry eyes of the woman in front of him, her willowy eyebrows were raised, and her originally rose-like face was flushed with excitement and anger. She was indeed a beauty of the world. Enchanting pondered in his heart. She seemed to be really angry. Then, I won't dodge next time. Standing directly opposite her, he could help her up in time. Little Hachi was stunned for a moment. She immediately stared at Enchanting to make sure that he was not joking. He was actually saying this seriously. She gasped in disbelief. How could there be such a man in this world? He was straight, wooden, and extremely stupid. Why did he say that as if she couldn't wait to pounce on him again? Enchanting was confused. Why did she seem to be even angrier? Didn't he just say what she wanted? He knew that this girl seemed to have a lot of hostility towards him, so in order to avoid conflicts, he had been patient several times along the way. But every time, the other party didn't seem to appreciate it, and the conflict became more and more intense. Just you wait. Little Hachi turned around and left angrily. Her bright dress fluttered in the wind, like a light and enchanting butterfly, floating away. It was just that, she floated into the magnificent Yu mansion. Shifeng opened his mouth and wanted to remind her, but his nose hurt faintly, so he gave up. Wu Yao coughed. Eighth sister is used to being straightforward. Lord Enchanting, please don't mind her. Enchanting shook his head. Although he didn't understand why the other party was angry, but, if he offended the other party, then he would give in. If he really couldn't, then he could avoid it. What was the point of arguing with a little girl? Stepping into the mansion, Chu Luiyue was not surprised to see that there were festive red silk everywhere. Those who didn't know better would think that there was a big celebration here. This time, even Rong Xiu's footsteps were stagnant for a moment. Chu Luiyue suffocated for a moment, and then waved his hand. Sansan, you're dressed too ostentatiously. Have you forgotten what I told you before? You should be humble and keep a low profile. Sansan readily accepted his advice. This time, he quickly understood what Chu Luiyue meant. He immediately nodded in agreement. Master is wise. You see, I'm so happy that I'm confused by your arrival. He patted his head and waved at the person beside him. Men. Quickly remove all of these. In the future, the entire Yu residence will follow the wishes of Master and His Highness. Everyone responded in unison. Yes. As soon as they finished speaking, they quickly took action. The efficiency was astonishing. Chu Luiyue exclaimed in surprise. She originally thought that these servants were ordinary people, but now she realized that their strength seemed to be not bad. Although he wasn't the best, his movements were agile and his steps were light. Although they couldn't be compared to the Yuntian Tower, overall, they seemed to be quite well behaved. If there were more servants and their overall strength was higher, perhaps they wouldn't be worse than some of the third-class families. Sansan led them into the main hall. When he heard Chu Luiyue ask about the background of these servants, he laughed and said, Master, you're right. Master's guess is correct. They were all carefully selected by me. All of them have some talent and strength. Moreover, you can rest assured that I've done a detailed investigation on them before I recruited them. They are all clean and won't cause trouble. As for why he could find so many, naturally, it was because there were people coming to the Peach Blossom Cove every day. Those who could enter the Peach Blossom Cove were not weak. Among them, those who caught his eye were all pretty good. Chu Luiyue looked at him from head to toe. I can see that a few of them seem to be stronger than you. You alone. How did you make them listen to you so obediently? Sanson chuckled. He knew that Chu Luiyue was saying that he didn't cultivate properly. He didn't take it to heart and explained. Of course, it's not enough to rely on my strength alone. However, you've forgotten that I've opened a pharmacy. In the Peach Blossom Cove, any slightly better heavenly treasures and elixirs were extremely expensive. Not everyone could afford them. If they stay here and become part of the U residents, they can get these things at a very low price. This is an opportunity that many can't even dream of. I see. The Peach Blossom Cove was a place where good and bad people mixed together. Who knew how many people wanted to make a name for themselves here and become a powerhouse? However, they had to be alive. If they were alive, everything would be fine. If they were dead, they would have nothing left. It was no wonder that Sanson was able to amass such a fortune in such a short time. Wasn't this business in the Peach Blossom Cove a huge profit? Then what about the Black Sword sect? If others wanted to get some good herbs from Sanson, they would have to pay with their own lives or large amounts of money. However, the people from the Black Sword sect demanded that they deliver a certain amount of herbs to them every month. If they delivered the herbs in advance and didn't prepare them properly, they would draw their swords and injure them. To be so arrogant to such an extent, it was simply inconceivable. Sanson's face turned bitter at the mention of this. He glanced at Sun Yi and said with a frown. Actually, I've mentioned this to Big Brother before. My pharmacy was doing well, but ever since the Black Sword sect appeared, they demanded that I give them offerings. I wasn't willing to do it at first, but those people. A hint of fear flashed through his eyes. Those people are quite capable and not easy to deal with. Helpless, I could only agree. Chu Luiyue leaned back in his chair and fell into deep thought. Sanson valued money very much. It was already very difficult to get a single cent from him, let alone take away so many expensive herbs. It was basically a blatant bloodletting. Even under such circumstances, Sanson still tolerated it. It could be seen how domineering the other party was. If he hadn't been forced, she believed that Sanson wouldn't have agreed to do it. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows and asked casually. Since they are so interested in your pharmacy, why didn't they just take it? Why did they have to go through you? Wouldn't that be too troublesome? Digression, I'm running a fever. I'll try to write more. If I can't write more, I'll write in the title. Mobile users, please browse. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 1830. This was something that Chu Luiyue couldn't figure out. Looking at the way the Majin sect acted, it didn't seem like they would be kind. The truth was, although Sanson gave them a lot of valuable treasures every month and was bullied by them from time to time, Sanson was still living well. However, Sanson was indeed living well and earning a lot of money. This didn't make any sense. At the mention of this, Sanson's expression became a little strange. There was a rare conflicted look on his face, as if he didn't know how to start. This is a long story. He glanced outside, and after making sure that there were no outsiders, he said, Master, Your Highness, you know about Qingshui Cliff, right? Chu Luiyue nodded. That Zhao said that Qingshui Cliff had been split open by Tianlei, and that there was a small space inside where countless treasures grew. Sanson sighed. That's right. It's all because of Qingshui Cliff. When I first came here, I had been thinking about starting a small business, but I couldn't think of anything. Then one day, I was in a bad mood and wanted to go to Qingshui Cliff to relax. In the end, I ran into Tianlei. Fortunately, I reacted quickly and ran away in time, so Tianlei didn't hit me. However, Tianlei was tyrannical, and it stirred up the energy of heaven and earth around it. I couldn't get out at all, so I could only find a slightly safer place to hide. Tianlei exploded for most of the night, and it finally stopped when it was almost dawn. Originally, I wanted to leave as soon as possible after escaping with great difficulty. However, I inadvertently glanced and found that Qingshui Cliff had been split in half by Tianlei. There was a lake in the middle for some reason, and it was full of water. I was curious, and thought that since Tianlei had passed, there shouldn't be any danger, so I went over. Sanson rubbed his face as he said this. Sigh. Who knew that there really was another world in that place? I thought it was a lake, but it was actually a unique space where countless treasures were gathered. This was a windfall from the sky. He would usually pick up a copper coin when he saw it on the road, let alone when he saw such a scene. I was too excited and went over without thinking. However, as soon as I stretched out my hand, the barrier suddenly fluctuated and cut my palm. After that, I actually went in. Anne. Sanson sounded hesitant. Chu Luiyue understood something. Moreover, you became the master of that small space. Sanson scratched his head and answered in embarrassment. He looked up at Chu Luiyue. If I had known earlier, I would have left that small space for master no matter what. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. That's enough. This is your fortuitous encounter, and it should belong to you. What are you still hesitating for? How could she not know what kind of person Sanson was? He was probably overjoyed to have obtained such a small space by chance. Now that he said this, it was nothing more than a show of loyalty. Chu Luiyue knew his thoughts and methods like the back of his hand. He didn't even need to guess. Sanson laughed and rubbed his hands. Hee. Master knows me best. He did want to leave this thing for Master, but things like fortuitous encounters were hard to predict. Master, don't worry. Since this small space belongs to Sanson, it will naturally be yours in the future. Chu Luiyue touched his chin and smiled. That is to say, that small space is now completely under your control. Sanson shook his head. That's not entirely true. It's just that compared to others, I can go in and out at will, and I can bring a few people with me. Those medicinal herbs, I personally brought people to pick them every time. This was enough. That small space was equivalent to a treasure house, and Sanson was the only person who held the key. Sanson lowered his voice. Actually, I later found out that the stronger I am, the more people I can bring with me. His strength was limited now, and he could only bring a few people with him. But if his strength increased in the future, he might be able to bring hundreds of people with him. But the people of Majin sect don't know this. They only know that if I die, that small space will be sealed again, and even collapse. So they don't dare to do anything to me. This was Sanson's confidence. Chu Luiyue finally understood. No wonder, if that was the case, it was not hard to understand why the relationship between Sanson and Majin sect was so strange. The people of Majin sect used Sanson to obtain these heavenly treasures. And Sanson also used Majin sect's power to gain a foothold here. Chu Luiyue stared at him. Sanson, this is asking a tiger for its skin. Sanson coughed and showed an aggrieved expression. Master, I don't have a choice. As he spoke, he hurriedly looked at Cini. Help me say something. Cini had barely spoken since he came in. Seeing that Sanson was urgently asking for help, he slowly spoke. Although it's dangerous, it's a win-win situation. No matter what, it's better than being trampled on. In any case, Sanson still had a trump card in his hand, and it was this trump card that could save his life. Wu Yao, Big Brother is right. Big Brother is right. 13, Big Brother is right. Shifeng, Big Brother is right. Master, third brother is now equivalent to a hen that can lay eggs. If the people of Majin sect had any brains, they wouldn't do something like killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. The corners of Sanson's mouth twitched violently, and he looked at Shifeng with resentment. After they finished speaking, the room fell silent again. Chu Luiyue looked at little Hachi. At this moment, she was resting her chin on one hand and leaning against the chair listlessly, looking very listless. Chu Luiyue asked, "Little Hachi, what do you think?" Little Hachi didn't say anything. Little Hachi. Chu Luiyue called again. Little Hachi snapped out of her daze and looked up at Chu Luiyue. What? Ah, right, Big Brother is right. Chu Luiyue. What's wrong with you? You look like your soul has left your body. Little Hachi wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, her gaze fell on Sanson. Nothing, I was just shocked by third brother's beauty. Digression, have a meal and continue reading. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1831. Chu Luiyue looked at little Hachi thoughtfully. Did you quarrel with Enchanting again? Since when did I? Little Hachi immediately retorted and raised her voice. Chu Luiyue understood. Ah, they quarreled again. He didn't know why, but these two people always had conflicts when they were together. Little Hachi, on the other hand, was usually enchanting and charming. Other than the 13U sect, she basically spoke softly to men. Now that she was facing Enchanting, he didn't know what was wrong with her, but she was always very easily irritable. Logically speaking, Enchanting was such a big ice cube that could freeze people to death. If he didn't, he might keep going against little Hachi. He really didn't know how Enchanting had offended her. Chu Luiyue sipped his tea. Little Hachi, women who are often angry will age quickly. Little Hachi was dumbfounded and immediately touched her face. It's over, it's over. She had been angry for no reason recently. Could it be that she really had wrinkles? I'll go back and rest first. After leaving this sentence, little Hachi hurried out. What's a man? Beauty is more important. Chu Luiyue put down his teacup. It seemed that as time passed, some people's fatal weakness was still hit with one blow. How much do you know about the Ink Sword sect? Rong Xiao looked at Sanson. Have you seen the master they mentioned? Sanson's expression became much more serious, and she shook her head. The Ink Sword sect has a mansion here, but it's extremely strictly guarded. Even I have to go through many checks every time I go there. Moreover, their master is very mysterious. I haven't seen him even once after so long. Every time I meet up with him, it's the same middle-aged man, Mo Yun. Mo Yun is the vice sect leader of the Ink Sword sect. He has a very high position in the Ink Sword sect and is basically in charge of all the affairs of the Ink Sword sect. Mo Yun. Rong Xiao narrowed his eyes as a dark light flashed across his eyes. Did you think of something? Chu Luiyue asked. Rong Xiao paused and shook his head. It's just a guess, but nothing is certain yet. It wouldn't be too late to wait until he understood more about it. Chu Luiyue knew that he had never fought a battle that he had no confidence in. He would never make rash decisions about things that he still had doubts about, so he didn't continue to ask. What she wanted to know the most was why the Black Sword sect had spent so much effort on the Peach Blossom Cove. Take this place for himself. But even if there was a Qingshui cliff here, it wasn't theirs. What could they gain by wasting time here? Just for those medicinal herbs and pills? Not to that extent. For the abundant heaven and earth energy here. It wasn't worth it. In order to absorb more cultivators and expand his strength. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue asked again. After the people from Black Sword sect came, did the number of people in the sect increase by a lot? Sanson thought for a moment and said, to be honest, not by a lot. Anyone who wants to enter the Black Sword sect has to go through a month of examination. Only those who passed the test would be able to stay. Those who failed would be eliminated. From what I know, the elimination rate is very shocking. But even so, there are still people who want to go. This was to be expected. After all, the Black Sword sect was the strongest faction in the Peach Blossom Cove. If one could become a member of the Black Sword sect, their safety would be guaranteed, and they would be able to stay in the Peach Blossom Cove. Those who came from outside the Divine Ruins world desperately wanted to enter the Black Sword sect. Those desperados who had come here for various reasons naturally wanted to seize this opportunity. Actually, not everyone wants to go to the Black Sword sect. Many of them even have grudges with them. But until now, there hasn't been a single faction that can go against the Black Sword sect. Sanson explained. This was also why he was still in contact with the Black Sword sect. It was because life was forcing him. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. After hearing Sanson's explanation, she had a rough understanding of the current situation in the Peach Blossom Cove, including the Black Sword sect. But the more she knew, the more she found this matter to be tricky. She originally wanted to come here to take a look at Sanson's situation and prepare to establish her own faction. But now, because of the small space at Qingshui Cliff, Sanson was being watched by the people of the Black Sword sect. Tsinyi looked at Sanson calmly. Sanson, didn't you say that you've already chosen a few places for Master to choose? Oh. Right. I almost forgot about that. Tsinyi's words reminded Sanson. He quickly took out a few pieces of paper and handed them over. Master, the places listed here are the places I mentioned earlier. I've already written down their strengths and weaknesses. If there's anything you're not clear about, feel free to ask me. Chu Luiyue took the papers and looked through them carefully. These places were mostly places in the Divine Ruins world that were rich in heaven and earth energy. Some were ownerless, and some were. The ownerless places were more dangerous, and the ownerless places required more money to buy them from the aristocratic families. In short, each place had its own strengths and weaknesses. After Chu Luiyue finished looking through them, he handed them over to Rongxiu. Take a look. Rongxiu looked through them quickly and finished looking through them in a short while. He looked up at Chu Luiyue and smiled. Which one do you like? A moment of hesitation flashed across Chu Luiyue's face. Rongxiu's smile deepened. With a turn of his wrist, he returned the papers to Sanson. Sanson hurriedly caught it, and his eyes swept over the two of them. Master, Your Highness, which one do you like the most? There was a moment of silence. Rongxiu knocked on the table with his hand and smiled faintly. She doesn't like any of these. Sanson was shocked. She doesn't like any of them. These were all carefully selected by him. Why didn't the master like any of them? Chu Luiyue deliberated over her words. Sanson, in fact, it's not that you didn't choose a good place, but these are not suitable. If it's just a place to live, there's no problem. But if you want to use it for other things, it's not enough. She had her own plan. These places were obviously not enough to meet her requirements. But, with my current financial resources, I can only choose these. Sanson was embarrassed. Of course, he knew that these were not the best. But he really had no choice. Chu Luiyue smiled and comforted him. Don't worry, I don't mean to blame you. After all, this is a big deal. You have to think carefully. You can't rush it. Maybe there will be better ones later. Sanson had to nod. By the way, 3 days later, you will go to deliver the spirit melting grass in person. What are you going to do? Sanson looked even more embarrassed. The output of the spirit melting grass is very small. 3 days later, I'm afraid I can only give them half of what they need. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1832. This wasn't some ordinary herb that could be obtained just because they wanted it. Even if he went to pick it regularly, he had to have it first. If you can't meet their requirements, what will happen? Sanson shrugged. If I can't meet their requirements, then so be it. At most, they'll give me some punishment, but it won't be too excessive. After all, they still had to rely on him to bring people into Qingshui Cliff to retrieve those treasures. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. I have some here. You can take them and use them first. Although Sanson said so, she still felt uneasy when she thought of how ruthless the people of Majin sect were. It would be good if Sanson could suffer a little. Sanson was stunned for a moment. He was both surprised and nervous. This is too inappropriate, Master. Don't worry, I'm just lending these to you. Put them on the account first. You can return them when you have them in the future. Chu Luiyue smiled and comforted him. In any case, Sanson had that small space now. What kind of herb couldn't he want? As long as he waited, he would be able to return the loan with interest. Sanson's expression fell. Oh. He knew that he would never be able to take advantage of his master. Chu Luiyue stood up. All right, let's stop here for today. Everyone has been busy for a while. Let's go back and rest first. If there's anything, we'll talk about it later. The Yu residents occupied a large area. After removing those fancy things, it instantly became much more elegant. There were pavilions, terraces, and richly ornamented rafters. It had a rather noble aura. According to Sanson, he had specially bought this place before. When he bought it, this residence was still rather well preserved. So he didn't make any big changes. He wanted to wait for Chu Luiyue to come over and renovate it according to her preferences. However, Chu Luiyue couldn't be bothered to spend the effort. He said, "It's pretty good," and decided to continue living like this. Sanson felt rather sad when he heard this. Our master used to be so noble. Everything he ate and wore was the best. Now, he's not even picky about these things. Cini glanced at him indifferently. Master, you've experienced life and death, so you've already seen through these things. It might not be a bad thing. However, if I had known earlier that you had chosen those places, I wouldn't have urged my master to come here. In other words, he also despised it. Sanson was immediately embarrassed and thought about it. Big brother, don't worry. I'll work hard to earn money in the future. Let's strive to let master buy whatever she wants. Cini nodded and then left swiftly. It was fine as long as he had this awareness. According to Sanson's ability, it might not be impossible. Just like that, the group of people stayed in the Yu residence. Their arrival did not cause any commotion in the Peach Blossom Cove. Those who knew that Chu Luiyue was San's master, other than the people in the Yu residence and the few medicine shops, there was practically no one else. In addition, most of the people in the Peach Blossom Cove were busy with their own matters and rarely paid attention to others. Naturally, they did not care about this matter. This was also good. Chu Luiyue and the others were happy to have peace and quiet. The night was cold as water. There were no stars and no moon. A lantern swayed gently in the wind. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Chu Luiyue stood by the window and seemed to be able to smell the faint fragrance of peach blossoms in the air. For a moment, she almost thought that it was still a few years ago. It was as if nothing had changed. Rong Xiao walked behind her and hugged her waist, gently resting his chin on her shoulder. They were silent, but there was a tacit understanding. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed. Rong Xiao. Don't you think it's amazing? When we first met in the Peach Blossom Cove, I really did not expect that one day, we would be together and become husband and wife. Moreover, we will return here again. The scenery here did not change, as if it was the same as before. However, many places had indeed changed. Rong Xiao's thin lips curved slightly. No. From then on, I had already decided on you. From the first time, from the first sight. These were enough for him to chase after her for a lifetime. No matter how high the mountains were or how wide the sea was, no matter the sky or the underworld. Chu Luiyue felt as if something had gushed out from her heart, making her feel warm all over. She did not know how many lifetimes of luck she had to accumulate to meet someone whose soul was compatible with hers. Yet, he still doted on her like a pearl. Compared to him, the torture and suffering she had experienced in the past seemed to have become much lighter. Peach Blossom Cove has changed a lot in the past few years. Chu Luiyue murmured. I didn't expect that an ordinary Qingshui cliff would hide such a secret. Sansan is really lucky. Peach Blossom Cove was surrounded by mountains and countless peaks. Only Qingshui Cliff was hit by Tianlei, and Sansan happened to catch up. Rong Xiao's voice was lazy and low. He smiled faintly. If we go to those mountains to take a look now, we might encounter some opportunities. Who knows? Chu Luiyue laughed. How can it be that easy? After so many years, didn't Qingshui Cliff only appear in Peach Blossom Cove? Although she also wanted to have such an opportunity, this kind of thing was not easy to come by. Rong Xiao hugged her slender waist, and it was so soft that it was unbelievably soft. He said slowly. But it is not a coincidence that Qingshui Cliff appeared. Chu Luiyue paused and immediately turned to look at Rong Xiao. The two of them were very close to each other. With this movement, her soft lips gently brushed across his cheek. It was as if a spark had ignited. Rong Xiao's breathing changed slightly. But he still restrained himself and only kissed her gently on the lips. She was exhausted from the long journey. She really could not stand the torture. Chu Luiyue blushed slightly, but she quickly withdrew her thoughts. She pulled back a little and put some distance between the two of them. In this way, she could clearly see Rong Xiao's eyes. Those phoenix eyes were clear and deep, as if they could contain everything, but also as if they could only contain her. Do you mean that the Peach Blossom Dock has more treasures than just this one? Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows and asked. What do you think? Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. Rong Xiao's words made sense. Since such an opportunity had appeared at the bottom of Qingshui Cliff, it didn't mean that there weren't any other places. These mountain ranges were connected to each other. Perhaps there were other possibilities. However, other than Qingshui Cliff, Peach Blossom Cove hasn't made any big moves in all these years, nor have any amazing treasures appeared. If the Peach Blossom Dock really had the potential to be excavated, then why did so many aristocratic families and clans give up on this place? Men die for wealth, and birds die for food. They didn't come either because there was nothing here, or even if there was something here, it wasn't tempting enough for them. Of course, there was another possibility. They didn't even know what was here. Rong Xiao kissed her forehead and said in a low voice with a hint of laughter. Have you forgotten that your black shield was obtained from Peach Blossom Dock? Digression, I can't take it anymore, I'm going to sleep. Mobile users on the dead account, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 1833. Chu Liuyue's pupils shrank. She had really forgotten about this matter. Rong Xiao was right. She had found the black shield somewhere in Peach Blossom Cove. She had thought that it was very sturdy and convenient to use. But later, she gradually realized that this thing seemed to be more useful than she had expected. No, it was more than that. Until now, Chu Liyue had no idea what the limit of the black shield was. She had been through a lot of trouble, many of which had been life-threatening. But as long as she used the black shield, she had never failed. She had been injured mainly because her body was too weak. Even if the black shield had reduced most of the force, some of it would still reach her. But that did not mean that the black shield was not good. Because from the beginning to the end, it had never been truly shattered. Even the most serious injury only left a few scratches on the surface. Broken? No way. Chu Liyue had asked Taizu about the black shield, but even the knowledgeable Taizu could not tell her. Gradually, Chu Liyue put this matter aside for the time being. She had even forgotten that the black shield was from Peach Blossom Cove. If that's the case. Peach Blossom Cove is not as ordinary as it looks, Chu Liyue pondered. Whether it was the Black Shield or Qingshui Cliff, they were not opportunities that could be found in ordinary places. Could it be? A white light flashed in Chu Liyue's mind. She grabbed Rong Xiao's hand and asked. Is the reason why the people from the Black Sword sect are staying here because they've discovered something? Rong Xiao paused. It's hard to say. After all, they had not fought with them directly. They could not be sure what the situation was. Chu Liyue pursed her lips. Let's wait for Sanson to come back from Maojin sect. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Sanson took the spirit melting grass and headed to the Black Sword sect alone. The Black Sword sect was heavily guarded, and no outsiders were allowed to enter or leave as they pleased. Therefore, every time she went to deliver something, Sanson had to go alone and was never allowed to bring anyone with her. Fortunately, it was not the first time he had done this. In addition, Chu Liyue had helped him to replenish the spirit-melting grass, so everyone was not too worried. They were all busy with their own things in the mansion. When Sunyi came to look for Chu Liyue, she was looking at the prescription. Master, I plan to bring 13 out for a trip. Chu Liyue looked up from his book. Today. Is something the matter? A faint smile appeared on Sunyi's face. No, 13 is preparing to break through. I was afraid that the courtyard would be damaged, so I wanted to take him out and find a spacious place. Chu Liyue suddenly understood. Little 13 was about to break through to the 7th rank. According to his talent, the soul-gazing tribulation of this stage would most likely cause quite a commotion. Although the courtyard was large, it could not withstand the bombardment of Tianlei. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment. I'll go with you. She also wanted to see how much 13's talent and strength had improved. Sunyi did not seem surprised by her decision and nodded lightly. Yes. The thing that Peach Blossom Cove did not lack the most was mountains. Chu Liyue and Sunyi brought 13 to a remote and quiet mountain. Rong Xiao and Yan Qing seemed to be discussing something, so they did not follow. Chu Liyue looked around. She had not been here much. Although she and Rong Xiao had wandered around Peach Blossom Cove for a long time, Peach Blossom Cove was too big, and they could not go to every place. Therefore, this time, her feelings were very different. Master, big brother, I'll go now. Chu Liyue smiled and nodded. Don't be nervous. We're all here. Her calm and gentle eyes made 13 feel much more at ease. His lips curled into a smile as he turned around and headed to the mountain peak. Chu Liyue and Sunyi floated in the air and stayed around the mountain. 13 landed lightly on the top of the mountain. The young man who was smoking was tall and slender, looking slightly frail. The mountain wind blew, lifting the corners of his clothes. He took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and focused, beginning to absorb the energy of heaven and earth around him. Soon, the rich energy began to surge toward him. Dark clouds gathered in the sky. Faint sounds of wind and thunder could be heard. Chu Luiyue looked over. Behind the layers of clouds, silver heavenly lightning started to appear indistinctly. 13 also had a Tianjing Yuan meridian. She wondered how many Tianlei he could summon this time. The number of heavenly thunders attracted during the divine tribulation was, to a large extent, an indication of the level of strength a cultivator could reach in the future. Therefore, all cultivators paid special attention to this stage. They didn't have to wait for long. Boom! A bolt of heavenly lightning struck down. The energy around the mountain surged. Chu Luiyue waved her hand and set up a barrier in front of her, silently blocking the violent energy outside. The power of Tianlei was no longer a threat to her. 13's figure was shrouded by the dazzling white light, almost unable to be seen clearly. However, Chu Luiyue wasn't worried. Cin-Yi, with 13's talent, how many Tianlei do you think he can summon? Cin-Yi could be considered half a master to 13. He should be the most knowledgeable about this. Cin-Yi pondered for a moment. Probably, boom. At this moment, a loud sound came from the other side of the sky. Chu Luiyue and Cin-Yi both turned to look. They didn't know when, but that side had been covered by thick dark clouds. And looking at the situation, it seemed that Tianlei was about to fall. There's someone else cultivating here. Chu Luiyue was a little surprised. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? It was still morning. Moreover, in order to let 13 focus on breaking through, they specially ran a long distance and made sure that this place was remote and quiet before choosing this place. They actually encountered someone like this. And they were also breaking through. Soon, Chu Luiyue discovered that the other party's formation was even grander than theirs. It seems that a cultivator of a high level is breaking through, Chu Luiyue murmured. Boom! Tianlei fell from the sky like a silver snake. It struck down fiercely. However, this Tianlei didn't fall on the peaks of the mountains below. Instead, it seemed to fall in the valleys of those mountains. Boom! Then, a second strike followed. Chu Luiyue was slightly surprised. The speed at which this Tianlei fell seemed to be a little abnormally fast. Cin-Yi stared at the sky not far away and frowned slightly. Seeing his expression, Chu Luiyue asked, "Is there something wrong?" Cin-Yi nodded and pointed in that direction. "Master, look carefully. The places where the two bolts of heavenly lightning fell are not the same. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 1834. Hearing his words, Chu Luiyue looked over again. This time, she found something fishy. "You're right. Although the two Tianlei are both falling toward the canyon in the middle of the mountains, their exact locations are indeed different. Because they were not far away, and the two of them had amazing eyesight, they could see very clearly. At first glance, they would not notice anything wrong. But if they looked carefully, they could easily see the problem. However, the distance between the two Tianlei doesn't seem to be far," Chu Luiyue frowned. "It's as if, boom." Before she could finish her sentence, the third bolt of lightning struck immediately after. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment and laughed. How interesting, these three Tianlei seemed to be striking the same place, but the locations where they landed were different. If a normal cultivator was breaking through, or a refiner was triggering the Tianlei to refine a divine artifact, these Tianlei should have landed in the same place. How could they be so scattered? It was really strange. Don't worry about that side for now. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze and looked at 13 again. At this moment, he had already survived the first Tianlei. The second Tianlei was surging in the clouds. Looking at his situation, he should be doing well. No matter what the situation was over there, she would not allow 13 to be disturbed. The distance between the two sides was really close. They were both triggering the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue only hoped that the people over there could do their own things peacefully. Soon, the second Tianlei of the Ascension Tribulation that belonged to 13 fell with a bang. This time, the power contained in the Tianlei was clearly much stronger than the first one. The edge of the mountain had already been charred black. Fortunately, 13's condition had always been good and he was as steady as a rock. Chu Luiyue felt a little more at ease. All these years, 13 had been following Xin Yi and the others. Although he could not officially become a disciple, he was not delayed. Xin Yi was extremely smart. He knew how to guide them, and that was the best way. This was also why although the 13 were together all year round, their interests and specialties were all different. Their personalities and so on were also different. Chu Luiyue was very confident in Xin Yi. Looking at 13's situation now, she was even more certain of this point. The movement over there seems to be expanding. Xin Yi suddenly said. Chu Luiyue looked sideways and frowned. In just a short while, a lot of Tianlei had gathered. At a rough glance, there were at least 4 or 5 streaks of lightning shuttling through the clouds like silver snakes. And almost without any hesitation, they struck down. Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while and felt even more confused. The reason for that was because the heavenly lightnings were still striking down in the same manner as before. She had almost never had she seen such a situation. However, what worried her the most was that the dark clouds over there were surging even more violently and had even begun to spread to the surroundings. If they continued to come this way, they would definitely affect 13. Just as Chu Luiyue was pondering how to solve this problem, a black figure suddenly flew out of the valley, rapidly heading in Chu Luiyue and Xin Yi's direction. Seeing the other party's clothes, Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. Dressed in black robes, a huge hood nearly covering half of his face. Embroidered on the left side of his chest was a picture of 2 intersecting swords, reflecting the bloody moon. Ink sword sex people. Sensing the biting cold killing intent from the other party, Chu Luiyue's body instantly tensed up. This person did not come with good intentions. Xin Yi narrowed his eyes slightly, calmly clenching his fists in his sleeves. In the blink of an eye, the black-clothed person was already in front of them. Shwa! He directly drew the saber at his waist. Who are you? How dare you trespass into Ink Sword Sex Mountain region? You really don't know the meaning of death. Chu Luiyue frowned. Ink Sword Sex Mountain region. This is Ink Sword Sex territory. Why didn't she know? This place could practically be considered a desolate mountain range. How did it mysteriously become their territory? If it really was theirs, why wasn't there even a barrier or a sign? On the way here just now, she didn't even see a single person in charge of guarding it. We've already been here for so long. If this really was your territory, you should have stopped us from the start, shouldn't you? Chu Luiyue countered with a question. The other party clearly didn't expect Chu Luiyue to be so gutsy. After hearing Ink Sword Sec's name, he still dared to refute so arrogantly. He was momentarily at a loss for words. This indeed wasn't their territory. It was just that he suddenly sensed someone here just now, so he came over to chase them away. His gaze became even more sinister, like a blade scraping past Chu Luiyue and Xin Yi. You two are newcomers. Anyone who had stayed in Peach Blossom Cove for a period of time wouldn't speak to him with such an attitude. Only those newcomers who didn't know anything would be so tactless. Chu Liuyue's gaze turned slightly cold. The other party's gaze and tone made her extremely unhappy. What? Newcomers don't have the right to stay here. Chu Liuyue's red lips curled into a cold arc. We'll mind our own business and live in harmony. Isn't that good? Why do you have to be so ruthless? As you can see, our child is in the midst of a breakthrough. At such a time, you must not disturb him. Whoever dared to interrupt 13's cultivation, she wouldn't let them off easily. Hearing her words, the aura of the black-robed man instantly turned sinister. The surrounding temperature seemed to drop by a few degrees, causing one to unconsciously feel a chill in their hearts. Chu Liyue also began to circulate the force in her body. But then, his gaze landed on 13. Gazing at God's tribulation, he muttered in a low voice. Looks like your talent isn't bad. For some reason, his low voice made Chu Liyue suddenly feel an intense uneasiness in her heart. That gaze of his, she frowned. Just as she was about to ask him to leave, that man suddenly pointed the tip of his sword at 13. There was a trace of excitement and bloodthirstiness in his sinister voice. Hand him over, and I'll let you off today. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1835. Chu Liyue took a moment to understand what he was saying. At that moment, she almost laughed out loud. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said just now. Could you please repeat it? The black-robed man glanced at her coldly and said word by word, I said, hand him over to my ink sword sect. This was not a question, nor was it a negotiation. It was an order. Chu Liyue was still smiling, but her eyes were much colder. Interesting. It had only been 3 days since she came to the Peach Blossom Dock, but she had already met the Ink Sword sect twice. The first time, they snatched something from her. This time, they actually snatched someone from her. 13 is my man. He grew up with me. I'm afraid I can't agree to this request. Chu Liyue said coldly. The black-robed man looked at her in surprise, as if he was shocked that she would say such a thing. Do you know how glorious it is to be able to enter my ink sword sect? Countless people in the Peach Blossom Dock have tried their best, but they couldn't enter my ink sword sect. Now that we have taken the initiative to ask for him, it is his and your supreme glory. Don't be muddle-headed. This warning sounded like a joke in Chu Liyue's ears. They wanted 13, wasn't it because of 13's talent? Just a moment ago, he was still overbearing and filled with killing intent, looking as if he could not wait to execute them on the spot. However, after seeing 13, he changed the topic, saying something about handing 13 over to him. He even said that it was their great fortune to be able to enter the Black Sword sect. Bah! How shameless! Chu Liyue hid her thoughts and smiled politely. I'm sorry, I still refuse. The atmosphere at the scene instantly froze. The air seemed to be frozen, and the coldness was bone-piercing. The black-robed man was so angry that he laughed. Are you sure? I've already said it twice. Didn't you hear me clearly? Chu Liyue smiled, but there was a trace of impatience in her eyes. She hadn't settled the score of robbing her, and now he wanted to rob her again. This was too much. You! The black-robed man probably hadn't met someone with such an unyielding attitude in a long time, and someone who dared to talk to him like this. For a moment, he was so angry that he couldn't say a word. Rumble. Almost at the same time, the Tianlei of both sides descended from the sky. Moreover, because the forces on both sides were growing larger and larger, the distance between the two large dark clouds was rapidly shrinking. Soon, the two forces would come into contact and entangle with each other. This was definitely not a good thing. Training, especially when summoning Tianlei and preparing for a breakthrough, required absolute focus. At this time, any external influence could very likely lead to the failure of the breakthrough. This was what Chu Luiyue was worried about from the beginning. She raised her head to take a look, and her expression darkened. When the black-robed man saw this, he didn't seem worried at all. Instead, he sneered. How can the Tianlei summoned by the divine tribulation be compared to the Tianlei we summoned? If you really choose to fight us head-on, the only one who will suffer in the end will be you. Whether it was the number of Tianlei or the tyrannical strength, 13th side couldn't be compared to the other side. If they really collided, it was tantamount to hitting a rock with an egg. The other side might not be affected much, but for 13, it was very likely that his breakthrough would fail. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue's mouth suddenly curved into a smile. Oh, is that so? Digression, not only did she have a cold and a fever, but her period was also kicking the door. She was completely useless. Continued at 6 p.m., I am Iron Man Wong February. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1836. She didn't want to get entangled with the other party. After all, she still didn't know what kind of background the Black Sword sect had. But if they went too far, then they couldn't blame her. I won't hand him over to you. As for Tianlei, third brother. At this moment, a rough man's voice suddenly sounded. Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed as he saw another person flying out of the canyon. What are you dawdling over there for? Why aren't you back yet? That man didn't come over and only shouted from afar. From his tone, it seemed that he had a higher status than the man in front of Chu Luiyue and the others. The man called third brother hurriedly explained, second brother, someone is breaking through here. He's summoning the divine tribulation, he's just a rank 6 warrior. Why hasn't he been dealt with after so long? The second brother seemed to be very dissatisfied with this. This third brother wanted to explain that he had wasted some time because he had taken a fancy to the young man who was about to break through and had good talent. Enough. We can't care so much now. Come back immediately. We don't have enough manpower here. What time was it now? How could he care about that? Third brother could only respond, yes. He raised his foot and was about to move when he turned around and gave Chu Luiyue a deep look. Since you're not willing, wait to collect that kid's corpse later. When all of Tianlei was activated, how would there be any room for that kid to break through? At that time, only death would await him. That kid was indeed a good seedling. If he was handed over, he might be able to get a lot of rewards. What a pity. A trace of unwillingness and resentment flashed across third brother's eyes as he left in a flash. Not long after, his figure disappeared behind the mountains. Tianlei was still descending. However, his movements didn't hesitate at all. In fact, he was in a hurry. Those who didn't know would think that he was rushing to do some mission. Chu Luiyue's heart lit up. Cini, did that man say that they don't have enough manpower? Cini nodded. That's right. This was even more strange. What was going on over there? What was going on over there? How could someone say that they didn't have enough manpower when facing so many people from Tianlei? Chu Luiyue frowned and fell into deep thought. At this moment, the edges of the two dark clouds in the sky had begun to touch each other. The commotion caused by 13th side could not be compared to the other side. At a glance, it was only 1/10 of the other party's size. Under such circumstances, the power of Tianlei that 13 summoned would most likely be devoured by the other party. This was also why the man had warned Chu Luiyue before he left. This was a battle without any suspense to begin with. Chu Luiyue looked at 13. He was already undergoing the tempering of the 4th Tianlei. From the flickering light, one could vaguely see that his clothes were torn and stained with blood. Clearly, this was already a somewhat difficult process for him. If he were to be affected by external forces at this time, rumble. In the distance, Tianlei was descending on an even more terrifying scale. Thick dark clouds surged madly, covering the sky and the sun. The energy of heaven and earth gradually began to riot. Above 13's head, the fifth Tianlei in the clouds had already appeared, but it did not descend for a long time. Under the influence of that terrifying external force, the Tianlei was faintly showing signs of being absorbed. This could not continue. Chu Luiyue made up his mind. When the other party's clouds covered and devoured 13's Tianlei, it would be too late. Sun Yi took a step forward. Master, why don't I look after 13? Chu Luiyue's expression was calm. His pitch-black eyes seemed to flash with a biting cold light. Whoosh! A snow-white longsword suddenly appeared in her hand. The next moment, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot, and her slender figure instantly shot into the sky like an arrow leaving the bow. Her movements were light, her dress fluttering, and her long hair dancing with the wind. In this dark heaven and earth, she was like a blazing green bird, diving into the surging black clouds without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, she disappeared. Sun Yi frowned slightly, but soon relaxed. He did not move. A short silence. Immediately after, a sword light suddenly split open the thick layer of clouds. Scarlet Heaven Sword, break. Chu Luiyue's figure appeared once again. The clouds that had originally begun to merge were actually split apart by her. Then, the dark clouds, with her as the center, surged in two different directions. Sword energy overflowed and surged over. Sun Yi raised his head and looked at the red figure floating in the sky. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Her figure was slightly thin and frail. Behind her was the sky full of dark clouds, and in front of her was the boundless sword light. She had become the only color in this world. Sun Yi's tightly clenched hands slowly relaxed. A faint and long smile appeared in his usually calm eyes. Master, is still master after all. The commotion caused by Chu Luiyue's sword also attracted the attention of the people from Black Sword Sect. What's going on over there? Second brother raised his eyes to take a look, his thick brows tightly knitted together. That woman actually split the clouds apart. When he saw the scene clearly, there was finally a trace of disbelief in his voice. Beside him, third brother, who had just returned, was also stunned. That's not right. This was different from what he had imagined. They had attracted so much attention from Tianlei. Logically speaking, the other party should not be able to fight them head-on. But now, that woman, where did that woman come from? Second brother was still staring at the scene as he asked anxiously. I don't know. Sensing his aura turn cold and severe, third brother's heart trembled, and he unconsciously felt a lot more guilty. Smack! A loud slap sounded. Third brother staggered from the slap. The thick smell of blood instantly spread between his lips. But he did not dare to dodge or even cry out in pain. Second brother, calm down. Second brother sneered. You don't know. Then what were you doing over there for so long? Third brother's face flushed red, and he was speechless. He did not care about the other party at all, so he did not even ask for their names or origins. From beginning to end, he only cared about wrangling with them. They thought they were dead for sure this time. Who knew that woman's strength was actually so powerful? Second brother looked over again and saw that the clouds in the sky had been completely separated. There were painful roars and groans coming from the canyon below. Second brother glanced indifferently, suppressing the urge to go over and take a look. Continue. The most important thing now was still this matter. As for that woman's identity, they could just go back and investigate. Third brother was overjoyed that he had escaped a calamity. He hurriedly replied. Yes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1837. The sword chi split the clouds in the sky into two. An invisible force surged out, blocking all the external forces that tried to stop it. Chu Lua nimbly sheathed her sword and landed lightly. Xin Yi bowed slightly. Master, you're indeed extraordinary. Chu Lua raised her eyebrows and glanced at him. I know that if you fight, you might not be inferior to me. In that case, there's no need to say anything more. Xin Yi insisted. What Xin Yi said is the truth. Chu Lua smiled and couldn't be bothered with him. Xin Yi had followed her for many years and usually didn't talk much. It was rare for him to praise her like this, so Chu Lua felt very pleased. She weighed the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand. As her strength continued to increase, she became more and more proficient in using the Scarlet Heaven sword. She raised her head to take a look. In the sky, the sword chi she left behind had already formed a huge barrier. This should be enough to last for a while. Chu Lua exhaled softly. This feeling of gradually becoming stronger, it was really satisfying. Finally, the fifth Tianlei, without the influence of other forces, fell with a loud bang. Ink Sword Sect. Sanson came out from the side door. Beside him was a middle-aged man. Sanson stood still, cupped his hands respectfully, and said with a smile. Deputy Sect Master, it's already my great honor that you came to send me off personally. Please stay. Mo Yun's figure was tall and sturdy. Just by standing there, he exuded an imposing aura. Hearing this, he laughed. Third boss, you're too polite. This old man knows that we've been in a hurry recently, and it's been quite difficult for you. Especially this spirit-melting grass, it's not something that can be obtained just because you want it. Third boss, please forgive my subordinates for offending you earlier. Sanson hurriedly said. I don't dare. I can be where I am today all because of Ink Sword Sect. Originally, it was my servants who didn't know the rules, so they made a scene. I didn't expect to alarm you. Mo Yun patted Sanson's shoulder and laughed. Third boss, don't worry. You're an important guest of Ink Sword Sect. How can they not be punished for hurting your men? As he spoke, he turned his head slightly. Men. Present the compensation to third boss. The servants who were following behind him at a distance hurriedly came forward and carried the wooden box that had been prepared earlier. Sanson glanced at it. In fact, he had noticed it since the beginning. He just didn't expect that this was actually an apology gift to him. Just as he was about to reject her, he felt the hand on his shoulder tighten. Third boss, this represents the sincerity and willingness of my Black Sword Sect to continue working with you. You must definitely accept it. Sanson's round face trembled slightly. Then, it narrowed its eyes and smiled. It is my honor. Since that's the case, then this Sen won't refuse. After he finished speaking, he took the wooden box. Mo Yun was obviously very satisfied with his answer and withdrew his hand. Third boss is a straightforward person. It just so happens that there is something I need to discuss with you. Recently, the Black Sword Sect has been recruiting a lot of disciples, so the consumption of medicinal herbs is extremely high. So, from next month onwards, the amount will be doubled. Third boss, is there any problem? Sanson's eyelids twitched fiercely. He knew that there must be a demon behind this abnormality. Mo Yun had always been extremely arrogant towards him. He wished that his eyes could grow on top of his head. When had he ever spoken to him in such a tone? Moreover, the Black Sword sect had hurt the people in his medicine shop several times in the past, but they had never expressed anything, let alone solemnly apologizing and making amends. So, they were waiting to ruthlessly rip him off. Double, how much money would that be? Sanson's heart was throbbing painfully and bleeding. He said somewhat awkwardly, Vice Sect Leader, it is my honor to contribute my meager strength to the Black Sword sect. But this double. I really can't afford it. This. Mo Yun's smile faded a little. Third boss, do you still feel embarrassed? Sanson choked and began to curse in his heart. It was more than embarrassed. It was simply too difficult. This time, just the spirit-melting grass, he had to borrow some from his master to gather all of it. In the future, it would be doubled. Where was he going to get it? But he naturally didn't dare to say these words. His smile became even more humble. Vice Sect Leader, please don't misunderstand. Sanson is really wholeheartedly loyal to you. It's just that twice is a little too much. Even if you empty out Sanson's fortune, I really don't have it. You see, if it's really so easy to take it out, there wouldn't be such a commotion 2 days ago, right? Mo Yun stared at him until Sanson was sweating all over. Only then did he let go of his mouth. Then. I'll add half of it. This should be fine, right? Sanson's heart was still bleeding, but he also knew that there was no room for negotiation. He could only smile and agree. All right. Don't worry, in the future, Sanson will definitely go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. Only then did Mo Yun's expression become better. After exhorting a few more words, he finally let Sanson leave. Sanson carried the wooden box and returned to the Yu mansion alone. Third brother, you're back. As soon as he entered the door, Yujio came up to him. How is it, are you all right? After returning to his own place and seeing his own people, Sanson's hanging heart finally calmed down a lot. Yujio, why are you here? Were you waiting for me? Yujio nodded. Master and Big Brother went out and told me to wait for you here. If there's any news, inform them immediately. Sanson smacked his lips. Master and Big Brother treat me the best. This feeling of being cared for was something that he had not felt in a long time. He put down the wooden box and sat down. He picked up the tea beside him and drank it. Every time he came out of the Ink Sword sect, he felt like he was walking on the line between life and death. He was so nervous that his throat was dry and his whole body felt uncomfortable. After drinking 3 cups of tea in a row, he finally gasped for breath and gritted his teeth. How can I be fine? Those people from the Ink Sword sect are too much. Yujio walked over and her expression changed when she heard this. What's going on? Sanson immediately told him what had happened. They already asked for a lot, and now they're increasing the amount. They're really going to exploit me completely. Yujio looked at him sympathetically. To third brother, this was indeed more painful than having his flesh cut off. When you're under someone else's roof, you have no choice but to lower your head. Third brother, you'd better bear with it for now. When Master comes back, we'll think of a way to get it back. Yujio said a few words of persuasion and pouted at the wooden box. Didn't they give you a gift in return? Sanson snorted. In any case, it won't be anything good. Yujio chuckled. It's better than nothing, isn't it? Let me help you take a look. As he spoke, he walked over and gently slashed with the wooden sword in his hand. The lock made of fine iron was silently cut in half. The cut was smooth and neat. Then, he turned his wrist slightly and opened the wooden box. Ha! Yujio immediately took a few steps back. In the wooden box, there were a few human heads. Digression, my throat can't speak anymore. I'm drinking hot water like crazy. I will also strive for more chapters today. The time is not fixed. Everyone can read it before going to bed or read it tomorrow. Mobile users can browse and read it. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1838. Sanson immediately stood up, his expression changing a few times. Yujiro turned to look at him. Third brother, this. What's going on? Didn't they say that they wanted to apologize to you? What is this? Sanson stared at the heads with a serious expression. These should be the people who caused trouble in the medicine shop. I didn't expect that Imo-yun's apology would be their lives, Yujiro immediately remembered. So it's them. He was also there that day, but the people from Ink Sword sect were all wearing black robes and their faces were mostly covered by their wide hoods. He didn't take a closer look, so he didn't recognize them at first glance. Now that he looked again, it was indeed those people. Third brother, what's the meaning of this? Are they so ruthless to their own people? Yujiro frowned in disgust and closed the wooden box again. However, the air was still filled with the faint smell of blood and decay. Sanson sneered. Yujiro, you've just arrived, so you don't know what kind of people these people are. They can do anything to anyone, including themselves. These rotten fish and shrimps are nothing in Imo-yun's eyes. Imo-yun did this to give him an explanation for what happened that day, and to give him a warning. Of course, he knew that if he asked Sanson for more things, it would definitely arouse Sanson's dissatisfaction. That was why he sent this gift. The meaning was very clear: if you want to live well, then be obedient. Although they wouldn't kill Sanson now, it didn't mean that they wouldn't threaten him, or even hope to completely control him. In these 2 years, the people from Ink Sword sect had used many methods, explicitly hinting to him to join Ink Sword sect, but Sanson had evaded them all. Gradually, they stopped talking about this matter. However, this desire to control him clearly hadn't changed. Sanson walked over, and a ball of dark blue flames appeared in his palm. Boom! The wooden box, along with the heads inside, was quickly engulfed by the flames. In a short moment, it was burned to ashes. Yujiro looked at him in surprise and excitement. Third brother, you're good. When did you get such a skill? Sanson's talent was not bad, but it was only limited to martial artists. Only a celestial physician was capable of transforming the origin power into flames. At the mention of this, Sanson's face showed some joy, and he rubbed his meaty palms. This is naturally the opportunity of Qingshui Cliff. Back then, he discovered that he had formed some kind of subtle connection with that small space, allowing him to enter and exit it at will. Soon after, he discovered that there was an additional ball of fire in his body. With this fire, he also became a celestial physician. Although his level wasn't high, he more or less knew a thing or two about it. It was also because of this that he became more sensitive to those heavenly treasures and medicinal pills, which allowed his business to flourish. This was one of his trump cards. Yujiro praised. Looks like this Peach Blossom Valley is really a treasure trove for you, third brother. No wonder you're doing so well here. Sanson smiled. Then, she recalled what had happened a moment ago. A faint haze appeared between her brows. Unfortunately, as long as the Black Sword sect stands above me, my days won't be easy. Oh right, where did Master and Big Brother go? Yujiro put away the wooden sword in her hand and gave a rough location. Sanson was just about to sit down when he heard her words and jumped up. Where did you say? Yujiro looked up in surprise. I only said that they went in the southwest direction, but I don't know the exact location. Little 13 is about to break through, and it's time to trigger the soul-gazing tribulation. Master and the others were worried that it would cause too much of a commotion, so they said that they would go to a remote area to take a look, Oh no. Sanson's cold sweat broke out again with a schwa sound. He hurriedly ran outside. Yuchio pulled him back. Third brother, why are you in such a hurry? Is there something wrong over there? There's no time to explain. I'll go over and take a look first. We'll talk when I come back. Sanson hurriedly took 2 steps, then turned back and said to Yuchio, you don't have to follow. Just wait here. Yuchio hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. Be careful, third brother. Sanson waved his hand and left without looking back. How could he not be anxious? On this day of every month, he couldn't go over there. He actually forgot to tell Master about such an important matter. Damn it. Sanson felt guilty as he ran at full speed in the direction Yuchio said. Time always passed very slowly while waiting. Chu Luiyue and Cini stood in mid-air, waiting for 13 to pass the soul-gazing tribulation. He had already summoned the 7th one. Of course, he had also paid a huge price to endure this Tianlei. On the mountain peak, 13 half-knelt on the ground, his hands clasped tightly on the rough ground. His fingertips were already stained with blood. His thin body was trembling. It was obvious that he was enduring a great deal of pain. Chu Luiyue looked at the sky. Behind the clouds, the 8th Tianlei was faintly discernible. If 13 couldn't endure the 7th Tianlei, then the 8th Tianlei would naturally disappear. 13 had already spent too much time on this stage. Chu Luiyue was somewhat worried. Cini, can 13 make it? Cini nodded calmly. Of course. Chu Luiyue glanced at him in her usual nonchalant, calm, and indifferent manner. Are you so sure? Cini seemed to smile. Master, you should believe in 13's talent and potential to be chosen by Headmaster Nansu Huai. All these years of hard work weren't in vain. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue's heart calmed down. Cini had spent more time with 13, so he definitely knew him better. Since he was so sure, there shouldn't be a problem. However, as a bystander, she felt her heart ache as she watched from here. In her heart, she had always treated 13 as a child. Back when she was going through the soul-gazing tribulation, she had many trump cards. But 13 was going through it head-on. Suddenly, 13, who was kneeling on the ground, moved. He let out a low roar, mixed with countless complicated emotions. Pain, torture, perseverance, determination. When he stood up, the silver light surrounding him instantly shattered into countless specks of light. The 7th Tianlei, break. Chu Luiyue was overjoyed. Immediately after, the 8th Tianlei came crashing down. Boom! There was a loud sound. 13's figure was swallowed by the light again. Chu Luiyue frowned. This sound was too loud, no. This sound came from the large pile of dark clouds behind them. Chu Luiyue turned around and instantly widened her eyes in shock. There seemed to be a burst of energy in the dark clouds. At this moment, the black clouds and the silver Tianlei scattered in all directions. Affected by the powerful impact, a large portion of them actually flew directly towards them. Digression, there's still one more update, which will be a little late. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1839. What's going on? Chu Luiyue frowned as she looked over in bewilderment. Everything was fine before. Why did it suddenly explode? She had never encountered such a situation before, whether it was cultivation or weapon refinement. But she didn't have time to think about that now. There were at least a dozen Tianlei coming their way. If they were allowed to continue fighting, 13's side would probably. It wasn't easy for Chu Luiyue to wait until now. How could she allow her previous efforts to go to waste? The power boundary formed by the sword aura started to shake violently under the impact of this violent power. It wouldn't take long before it was broken through. Chu Luiyue gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly. At this moment, several figures suddenly rushed out from the valley behind the mountain peak and fled in a sorry state. Chu Luiyue's gaze focused as she carefully looked at them. That bold three was among them. Their initial arrogance had completely disappeared and was replaced by endless panic and fear. There were also a few other people who were dressed like Black Sword sect members. They seemed to be injured, and one of them even had a broken arm. Was it because of the commotion just now? Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, the Tianlei had already rushed in front of them. A green figure flashed past. Xin Yi waved his sleeve and a faint green boundary covered Chu Luiyue's sword aura boundary. With the two layers of barriers superimposed on each other, the power of the barrier was greatly increased, and the shaking barrier immediately stabilized. Chu Luiyue glanced at Xin Yi. After not seeing him for so long, his strength had indeed increased by quite a bit. Just from that move, it was enough to determine that Xin Yi's strength was definitely not below hers. This made Chu Luiyue's tense heart relax a little. Boom boom boom. The Tianlei came one after another and fiercely crashed into the boundary. The intense collision of energy produced a huge sound. The silver Tianlei power spread in all directions. It was especially eye-catching under the dark sky. This was the scene that Sanson saw when she arrived. When he saw the heavenly lightning that was crazily scattering in all directions, his small eyes widened in shock, and the flesh on his cheeks trembled. As expected, the people from the Black Sword sect were here. He hurriedly looked around, searching for Chu Luiyue and Xin Yi's figures. Although Tianlei's light was too dazzling, he couldn't see many things clearly. Fortunately, he was able to recognize the barrier that was faintly cyan in color. Seeing the familiar barrier, Sanson quickly rubbed her eyes. When he saw that Chu Luiyue was standing behind Xin Yi, sword in hand and hair fluttering in the wind, he let out a long sigh of relief. Luckily, Master and Big Brother seemed to be fine. Seeing that the Tianlei behind them were still crazily scurrying, Sanson shuddered, but he still gritted his teeth and charged towards Chu Luiyue and Xin Yi without hesitation. The violent energy wrapped around his body as if it wanted to tear him apart. From time to time, some Tianlei would attack him. Fortunately, although Sanson's figure was round, he was very agile and nimble. He passed by without any danger. Master! Big Brother! Sanson narrowly dodged the attack and ran to the two of them, asking anxiously, "Are you guys alright?" Xin Yi moved his finger slightly. A crack was cut open in the barrier, and then, a strong force wrapped around Sanson's waist and pulled him over. Sanson's face twisted. "Big Brother. Can't you open a little more? It's uncomfortable for me to squeeze in here. It hurts." Xin Yi ignored him. With a thought, the barrier returned to its original state and continued to block the terrifying energy outside. "We're fine." "Sanson, why did you suddenly come?" Chu Luiyue asked curiously. "Didn't he go to deliver something to Ink Sword Sect today?" Sanson took a deep breath and explained, I heard that you, Big Brother, and Sher-san came here. I was afraid that... It's all my fault. I didn't tell you clearly earlier." Looking at Sanson's vexed expression, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She raised her chin. "You knew that Ink Sword Sect's people were here?" Sanson followed her line of sight. The few people who were running away pathetically just now had already disappeared. When Sanson came, he was only thinking about Chu Luiyue and the others. In addition, the sky was dark and there was violent energy everywhere, so he didn't pay attention to the situation over there, and didn't see those people. However, even if he didn't see them, he knew that they must be Ink Sword Sect's people. He scratched his head. It's a long story. I'll explain it to you when we get back. Fortunately, they've already left. If he stayed here and the two sides met, it wouldn't be good. How's Shirsan? Sanson turned his head to take a look. Chu Luiyue said. Right now, he's undergoing the tempering of the 8th Tianlei. He was almost messed up by them just now. Fortunately, he's fine. Sanson patted his chest. If something really happened to Shirsan, he would really die of guilt. Suddenly, a dazzling white light whizzed over from the side. Chu Luiyue looked over and saw that those Tianlei seemed to have made an agreement and were flying over together. She didn't know if it was because of Ink Sword Sect's people or because they saw that the Tianlei in front of them were easily blocked, but the remaining Tianlei sensed an unusual aura and flocked over. Crack! Finally, a crack appeared on the barrier. Chu Luiyue's eyes turned cold. She was only here to see Shirsan break through. She didn't expect that she would encounter wave after wave of trouble. There was really no end to it. Cini, move aside. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. Cini wanted to continue. Although the situation in front of him was a little troublesome, it wasn't fatal. But when he heard Chu Luiyue's voice, his expression changed slightly. Then, he respectfully retreated and gave up his position. Sanson looked at Chu Luiyue and nervously moved to Cini's side. Big brother, why do I feel a little cold? Cini glanced at him. Seeing that his lips were slightly pale from rushing over, Cini felt a rare sympathy for him. You should move back a little more. Ah. Sanson was taken aback, but its reaction was extremely fast. It immediately took a step back and took 2 steps back. Crack! The barrier was full of cracks. It was already on the verge of collapse. Chu Luiyue stared ahead, the aura on his body surging. The few bolts of lightning in front seemed to have sensed the danger. They immediately slowed down a lot and even showed signs of retreating. However, it was already too late. Chu Luiyue gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly and raised it high. Then, he slashed it down. Scram! Boom! A terrifying pressure and sword aura surged out. In an instant, the clouds scattered and thousands of rays of light exploded in the sky. Digression, rest. Tomorrow at 12 noon, mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1840. The Heavenly Thunders, who had been preparing to charge over aggressively just a moment ago, all retreated in a panic. The ones at the front had already been destroyed by the sword energy. Looking at the flashing lights in the sky, Sanson subconsciously took 2 steps back. His hair stood on end. Master's power was terrifying. Terrifying. At this moment, 13's aura finally exploded. Chu Luiyue looked back. 13's aura flowed. Countless silver lights quickly disappeared under his skin. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. A snow-white light flashed quickly from the bottom of his eyes. Sharp. Cold. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly. 13 broke through. The dark clouds in the sky began to disperse. The surroundings were a mess. The mountain under 13's feet was charred black by the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue looked around and was secretly glad that he did not stay in the U residence to let 13 break through. Master! 13 clenched his fist excitedly. Then, he quickly ran to Chu Luiyue. The young man's handsome face was covered in blood. He looked quite miserable. However, his eyes were astonishingly bright and filled with unconcealable joy. Master! I broke through. Moreover, He could clearly feel that his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. This was a feeling that he had never felt before. After passing the god's tribulation, it was indeed different. Chu Luiyue was also very happy. 13 had passed 8 Tianlei. He was definitely one of the best. His future potential was limitless. Most importantly, he was only 15 years old. With such talent, it was no wonder that master liked him. Good job. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up into a smile. There was no trace of the fierce aura that he had when he struck the Tianlei. Sanson sighed in his heart. 13 was probably the only one in the group who could enjoy such treatment. He coughed and said, "Master, since 13 has successfully broken through, shall we go back?" "No hurry." Chu Luiyue shook her head and looked in the direction of the mountains. "I still have some things to figure out." As she spoke, she gripped the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand and was about to head there. "Hey, master, please wait." Sanson saw this and quickly went forward to stop her. "Master, let's not go there." Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. "Why?" Sanson's expression difficult as he scratched his head. This, you know that place to go to the Black Sword sects ago?" Chu Luiyue asked. "That's not its ago." Hearing her words, Sanson knew that she had misunderstood and hurriedly explained. "You also know that the Peach Blossom Cove is vast, and the mountain ranges are continuous. Although the people of the Black Sword sect have always wanted to take it for themselves, they haven't been able to stretch their hands that far yet. It's just that on this day every month, they will choose a place to conduct the final test for those cultivators who want to enter the sect. Although they choose a different place every time, it's not far from each other. Last month, they did it nearby, so I guessed that they should be here this time. When I heard from Yujio that you were here, I hurried over. I was afraid that you would bump into them. In the end, they still bumped into each other. And a conflict broke out between the two parties. Although they didn't fight directly, it was obvious that they had a grudge." Chu Luiyue frowned. "Test? What kind of test would cause such a big commotion?" Sanson's expression became mysterious. He lowered his voice. "Master, you saw it with your own eyes. There's something wrong with the Black Sword sect's test. Actually, there are many people who know about it, but, since the Black Sword sect didn't mention it, no one dared to ask. I only heard that every time after the final assessment, those cultivators would suffer heavy casualties." Chu Luiyue sneered. Based on the situation in Tianlei just now, she knew how dangerous it was. How could an ordinary cultivator withstand it? Even the people from the Black Sword sect fled pathetically, what more others? "Since that's the case, we have to go and take a look." Sanson wanted to say something, but stopped. Chu Luiyue smiled. "Don't worry, they came to ask for Shirsan, but I rejected them. Even if we avoid them now, or even apologize, I'm afraid they won't accept it." "What?" Sanson was stunned. He glanced at Shirsan, and only then did he understand why his master was so angry at the Black Sword sect. This group of people actually targeted Shirsan, and even spoke rudely to you. Then there's no need to give in to them. Sanson thought of the few heads from before, and his stomach churned. I'll listen to master. Since his master was here, he didn't have to endure it. With his master's current background, if they really went against each other, the one who would be at a disadvantage might not be him. Chu Luiyue's figure moved, and she flew forward. The people behind him quickly followed. The test location chosen by the Black Sword sect was not far from them. Not long after, they arrived in front of the mountains. Looking down, they saw a long canyon. When he saw the situation below, Chu Luiyue's pupils contracted. Tsinyi narrowed his eyes slightly. Shirsan sucked in a breath of cold air. This is In the canyon, several corpses were strewn all over, blood flowing everywhere. Other than that, there were traces of Tianlei's bombardment everywhere. And because of the terrifying power of Tianlei, almost none of the corpses were intact. It was a ghastly sight, comparable to hell on earth. Even though they had all seen their fair share of bloody and cruel scenes, when they saw this scene, they were still so shocked that they couldn't speak for quite a while. Sanson was the only one who was relatively calm. Although this was his first time seeing this scene, he had some understanding of the Black Sword sect, so before he came, he had already guessed most of the situation. These people are all those cultivators who are supposed to be taking part in the test? Chu Luiyue asked. Sanson nodded. They should be. There was a rare solemn look on his face. The Black Sword sect has always announced to the public that most of the people they eliminated have left the Peach Blossom Cove. But now, it seems, all of them died in their hands. Shirsan couldn't help but ask. This isn't the first time they've done this. With such a huge commotion, didn't anyone notice that something was wrong? Sanson smiled bitterly. That's right. There's no such thing as an airtight wall in the world. Indeed, there were quite a few people who secretly had their suspicions. However, even so, they were unable to stop the footsteps of those who wanted to enter the Black Sword sect. The majority of them had no way of turning back. Since the Black Sword sect is their only hope, they will naturally choose to take a gamble. For many people, if they couldn't become strong, it would be more painful than death. Sun Yi suddenly looked ahead and said warily, "Someone's coming." Before he finished speaking, a light flashed in his hand, and a huge transparent cover covered their figures. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1841. Chu Luiyue looked over and saw that it was the people from Mojin's sect who had returned. Behind them was an unfamiliar man with a burly figure and a cold face. The most important thing was that his aura was very shocking. The few people beside him were very respectful in front of him. Obviously, he was the leader. Sanson suddenly gave Chu Luiyue a look and opened his mouth to spit out two words. Mo Yun. Chu Luiyue immediately understood. So he was that Mo Yun. But, why did he appear here? His speed was too fast. Mo Yun did not notice Chu Luiyue and the rest who had already hidden themselves. Coincidentally, the two sides were standing on the two sides of the canyon, so Chu Luiyue and the rest could clearly see their faces and expressions. Of course, they could also hear what they were saying. Mo Yun glanced at the canyon and frowned. His expression was obviously very dissatisfied. This is the result of your assessment this month. His voice was very cold, with a grave and biting cold pressure. The few people around him were still injured, but they did not dare to make the slightest sound in front of him. Hearing this question, the few of them were even more terrified. Vice sect leader, there is indeed no good seedling in this batch of people. Chu Luiyue saw that the man who was called second brother was trembling in fear as he bowed and answered. Because of fear, his face was pale. Not to mention the few people beside him. Mo Yun's expression was even colder. Even if it's like this, you should clean this place up. If anyone sees. There was no need to finish the threatening words, the people below naturally understood. Second brother and third brother looked at each other. Originally, they wanted to explain the previous matter, but looking at the current situation, they could not say it no matter what. During the assessment, they met outsiders, had a conflict with the other party, and lost in the end. Fortunately, those people were no longer here, otherwise, they would not be able to keep their lives. The few of them had a tacit understanding and swallowed those words back. You're right. It's all because we're too incompetent, that's why. Mo Yun waved his hand impatiently. A ball of black fog gushed out from his hand and quickly spread into the canyon. In just a few breaths of time, the black fog had completely covered the bloody and messy scene below. Sizzle, a scalp-numbing sound was heard. As Chu Luiyue listened, he unconsciously held his breath, but his eyes were still fixed on the ground below. After a while, the black fog receded. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. The corpses were all gone. Even the bloodstains on the ground had completely disappeared. At a glance, other than some charred marks left behind in Tianlei, there was almost no clue. No one would be able to guess what kind of terrifying and bloody scene had taken place here not long ago. All right, I'll let you off this time. There won't be a next time. Yes. After confirming that the traces in the canyon had been cleaned up, Mo Yun turned around and left. Second brother, third brother, and the others quickly followed. From beginning to end, they did not notice Chu Luiyue and the others hiding on the other side of the canyon. After their figures completely disappeared, Chu Luiyue took one last look at the canyon. Let's go back first. You manner. Inside the study, it was silent. Chu Luiyue sat behind the table, his expression calm. His long eyelashes drooped slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Xin Yi and the other two stood in front of him, waiting quietly. After a while, Chu Luiyue said, "They're looking for cultivators with outstanding talent." This was not a question, but a statement. Because judging from what they had seen earlier, this was the truth. No wonder they wanted to take 13 away. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Moreover, it was so urgent and tyrannical. It could be seen that a genius youth like 13 was extremely attractive to them. From their proficiency, it was clear that they had been doing this for a long time. Sanson said. Fortunately, Big Brother acted in time today and was not discovered by them. Otherwise, it would really be troublesome. Even though he did not like Maojin sect and wanted to cut ties with them as soon as possible, he did not know the other party's background. If he rashly made a scene, it would only make the situation worse. Chu Luiyue nodded, collected his thoughts, and looked at Xin Yi. "Xin Yi, I haven't seen you for a while. You've improved a lot in this aspect." Xin Yi nodded slightly. "It's just some small things for self-defense. I've made a fool of myself." Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. "That Mo Yun, if I'm not wrong, should be a venerable god expert. The remaining few are basically all high gods. To be able to avoid their detection. Xin Yi, you're usually good at everything except for one thing, you're too humble." Xin Yi's brows relaxed, and his usual indifferent expression disappeared. Protecting Master is Xin Yi's duty. This was what he should do. Chu Luiyue rubbed his chin. She could never win against him. Sometimes, even she was amazed by Xin Yi's abilities. "Master, for the sake of their own lives, they probably won't tell anyone about what happened today. You can rest assured about this for now." Sanson rubbed his hands and said. Chu Luiyue nodded. Sanson was quite familiar with their people. Since he had said so, it should be close to the truth. Moreover, that was what she thought as well. Although this matter might still be discovered later, it was more beneficial for them to hide it for a while. Because the people of Maojin sect clearly did not want any outsiders to know about this. Keep this matter a secret for now. No one is to reveal it. But if you discover anything amiss, report it immediately. Yes. The few of them responded in unison. Chu Luiyue thought for a while, then changed the topic, asking Sanson about the spirit-melting grass that he had sent to Maojin sect today. It was fine if he did not mention this, but when he did, Sanson felt like his heart was being twisted by a knife. He immediately told Chu Luiyue everything that had happened. He was filled with grief, and every word was filled with tears of blood. "Master, those are all your belongings. Aren't they trying to dig out all your treasures?" Chu Luiyue glanced at him with a smile. All right, you don't need to remind me of this matter. I'll get back at them in the future. After pondering for a moment, she said, when will you go to Qingshui Cliff next time? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1842. Sanson said, there are no specific rules about that. I go there a few times every month. After all, he had to earn money from his business and support the Masters of Ink Sword sect. If he didn't work hard, he wouldn't even be able to afford a full meal. Chu Luiyue stopped him from complaining about being poor. That's fine. I'll go there with you tomorrow. Sanson was shocked and widened his eyes. There was a big doubt in his small eyes. Master, where are you going? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. Why? I can't go. No. I'm just a little surprised. Sanson coughed. Weren't they talking about Ink Sword sect earlier? Why did they mention Qingshui Cliff in the blink of an eye? Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment and smiled. When I came here in the past, Qingshui Cliff was just an ordinary place. Now that it has become a treasure land, I naturally have to take a look. Also, didn't you say that there are many precious herbs there? Sanson nodded. Master was a celestial physician and had always been interested in treasures. It was normal for her to want to go to Qingshui Cliff. All right. I'll make the arrangements tomorrow. After Cun Yi and the others left, Chu Luiyue sat alone for a while. Creak, someone pushed open the door and came in. Chu Luiyue looked up. A snow-white robe fluttered. The person who came in was Rongxiu. Looks like I've gained quite a lot today, said Rongxiu with a casual smile as he walked over. Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're right. Today's trip was more than just a fruitful one. It was full of surprises. She just brought Sanson to break through, and accidentally stumbled upon a big secret of Ink Sword sect. She was really lucky. She pondered for a moment and told Rongxiu about what she saw today. Rongxiu listened to her from the start to the end with a calm expression. At the end, his thin lips curled up slightly and he even smiled. To dare to do such a thing here, it seems that the Ink Sword sect's ambition is not small at all. Chu Luiyue looked at him strangely. You. Why do you seem to have guessed it long ago? Rongxiu usually didn't show his anger on his face, but his reaction was too calm. He tilted his head and smiled faintly. When you went out today, I asked Yanqing to check some information. Chu Luiyue widened his eyes slightly. So you already know. Rongxiu smiled and shook his head. Half of it. Yanqing only found out that many of the people who participated in the monthly test of the Black Sword sect had mysteriously disappeared. However, he did not know that they had been dealt with in such a way. Chu Luiyue's mouth twitched. What was the difference between this and knowing? The reason why she knew so clearly was because she had seen it with her own eyes. However, Yanqing had only been out for half a day, and she had already found out all these. She was indeed more capable. How did he find out? Chu Luiyue was a little curious. Rongxiu poured himself a cup of tea. White steam rose in spirals, blurring his eyes. Back then, we also stayed here for a while, didn't we? Chu Luiyue was a little stunned. You mean? Rongxiu took a sip of tea. Any action he made seemed exceptionally elegant and noble. The light tea fragrance filled the air. It was a very familiar smell. He looked up slightly and met Chu Luiyue's eyes. His thin lips curved slightly, and there was a hint of a smile at the corners of his eyes. He was as noble as a banished immortal, but this gaze was so deep and quiet that it could swallow people. He nodded with a smile. I left a few people here. Digression, 6:00. My cold is a little better. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1843. Rong Xiao said this calmly. But Chu Luiyue understood what these words meant. This peach blossom dock had Rong Xiao's subordinates. Chu Luiyue was surprised at first, but then she felt it was normal. With Rong Xiao's character, it would be strange if he didn't have a trick up his sleeve. She couldn't help but smile. I didn't hear you mention it before. Rong Xiao pondered for a moment. I didn't expect it to come in handy today. But Mo Jin's sect was very careful, and that was all they knew. I wanted to tell you about it, but I didn't expect you to run into each other. Chu Luiyue nodded. It was not easy to find out about these things. After all, even Sanson, who dealt with Mo Jin's sect all day long, only knew a little about these things. If ordinary people asked too much, they would inevitably arouse Mo Jin's sect's suspicion. I plan to go to Qingshui Cliff tomorrow. Chu Luiyue said. Maybe we can find some clues about Peach Blossom Dock there. Rong Xiao understood that she wanted to confirm her previous guess, so he smiled and nodded. I'll go with you. It had only been a day since he left her side, and such a scene had happened. Fortunately, it was a close call. But he couldn't be at ease no matter what. Peach Blossom Dock was full of danger. He naturally had to protect his people well. It was a dreamless night. Early the next morning, Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao dressed up and followed Sanson to Qingshui Cliff. The streets were already bustling. Sanson took them to a remote path and went straight to their destination. The three of them were very fast, and it only took them an hour to reach their destination. Master, Your Highness, that's where Qingshui Cliff is now. Sanson stood still and raised her hand to point forward. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao looked forward. Not far away, there was a continuous chain of mountains. At the very center, there was a mountain that had been forcibly split into two. Compared to the handsome and tall mountain next to it, this place was half as short. Moreover, the mountain rocks were charred black, and not a single blade of grass grew. It looked completely desolate. However, upon closer inspection, there was a small winding path that extended all the way inside. At the end, there was a faint glimmer of light. It seemed that it was the small space that Sanson was talking about. And this path should be the one he usually took. Sanson took the lead and walked forward. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao followed closely behind. After walking for a while, Chu Luiyue looked around. There seems to be quite a lot of people here. She had already seen several waves of people pass by. However, those people seemed to have deliberately avoided this path and Qingshui Cliff. Sanson turned around and chuckled. Master, you don't know. Since I hit the jackpot at Qingshui Cliff, the people of Peach Blossom Dock like to come here to join in the fun, hoping to get the same opportunity. However, in the past 1 or 2 years, no one got any treasures, so fewer people came here. What you see now is not a lot of people. You should know that in the beginning, this place was full of people who came here to look for treasures. As for why they avoided Qingshui Cliff, naturally, it's because they know that this place is already my territory. Chu Luiyue glanced at him, raised her eyebrows and mercilessly exposed him. Isn't it because they know that Mo Jin's sect has taken a fancy to this place? The smile on Sanson's face froze, and he couldn't help muttering, it's fine as long as you know it in your heart. Why do you have to expose it in front of me? He had already suffered enough. His master had even stabbed him in the back. Chu Luiyue shook her head with a smile and looked into the distance again. It was not difficult to guess what these people were thinking. This includes me and Rong Xiao. Didn't we come over because we had such a guess? She just didn't know if she could find any clues this time. When Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu followed Sanson into Qingshui Cliff, many people also noticed them. However, because the two of them were disguised, outsiders only saw Sanson and his followers from afar and didn't pay much attention to them. Third boss went to Qingshui Cliff again. What's so strange about that? Qingshui Cliff is his. Doesn't he come here a few times every month? If I remember correctly, yesterday was the day he sent gifts to Maojin sect every month. He didn't rest today, and he actually came here so early in the morning again. It's a little strange. This third boss doesn't wake up early if there are no benefits. Could it be that he's in a hurry to get some herbs? Didn't you hear that a few days ago, people from Maojin sect went to his herb garden to get something in advance? Because they didn't prepare everything, one of his servants was injured. Yesterday, not only did he send something over, he also went to apologize. The way I see it, third boss is in such a hurry because Maojin sect is urging him to come. I guess so. Thinking about it, he's really unlucky. It wasn't easy for him to get such an opportunity, but now he has to share it with others for free. Who would be able to take it? So what? Not to mention him, even in the entire Peach Blossom Cove, how many people would dare to go against Maojin sect? Forget it. Forget it. Be careful of the trouble that comes from the mouth. Let's think about ourselves first. At least third boss has Qingshui Cliff. What do we have? All kinds of discussions entered his ears. Chu Liuyue's heart moved slightly as he looked at Sanson in front of him. If this happened to other people, they might not be able to take it anymore. But Sanson was different. His ability to handle matters in this area was almost unparalleled. From the letters he wrote before, no one could detect any gloom or unhappiness from him. Obviously, although Maojin sect's actions pained him, it didn't really affect him. He was an extremely open-minded person. In layman's terms, he was magnanimous. Fortunately, he was here, master. Sanson stood still and turned around to look at Chu Luiyue, only to find that his master seemed to be lost in thought. Chu Luiyue raised his eyes slightly and glanced at him. Sanson clutched his little heart. Master, why are you looking at me like that? What do you mean? Chu Luiyue snorted. I'm just thinking that you're really lucky. Sanson was instantly happy when he heard this. He loved it when people praised him like this. Of course. Look, this is the small space I told you about before. Chu Luiyue looked in the direction where his hand was pointing. Not far in front of him was a small lake. Above the lake, there was a barrier that glowed faintly. This was the faint light that they had seen from the outside. Looking up, it was Qingshui Cliff that had been split in half, and a ray of light shone down from above. Sanson took a step forward, and a faint blue flame appeared in his palm. Chi! The flame surged, and the barrier opened instantly. Sanson lifted his foot and entered. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu looked at each other and followed him. The barrier closed. The three figures completely disappeared. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1844. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes slightly as a white light flashed in front of her eyes. Before she could see the scenery in front of her clearly, a strong medicinal fragrance had already entered her nose. It refreshed her heart and made her feel comfortable all over. Chu Liuyue's heart tingled as she looked forward. Even though she had anticipated the scene of the small space before, she still couldn't help holding her breath when she really saw it. This place was really too big. Mountains, waterfalls, green grass, and clear streams. The rich energy of heaven and earth condensed into white mist and drifted in all directions. Countless natural treasures grew everywhere, and it was almost impossible to see the end at a glance. It was like a fairyland. Even the Medicine Wind Valley of Lingshao College was slightly inferior to this place. Even just standing here, one could deeply feel the vigorous vitality that was almost overflowing. This place, Chu Luiyue was rarely speechless. She was so shocked by everything in front of her that she couldn't speak. An eager and proud smile appeared on Sanson's face. Hee, master, what do you think? Do you like it? Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. This was more than just liking it, it was simply amazing. It should be known that the Medicine Wind Valley of Lingshao College was carefully maintained by the elders of the college for tens of thousands of years before it finally reached such a scale. But the things in front of her, he had actually managed to crush him with ease. Rong Xiao looked at the scenery in front of him and raised his eyebrows slightly, seeming to be a little surprised. But he quickly withdrew his gaze and turned his eyes slightly to Chu Luiyue. When he saw the joy in her eyes, there seemed to be a dark light in his deep eyes, and a smile appeared on his thin scarlet lips. It seemed that she was really happy. Chu Luiyue was still deeply shocked at this time and didn't notice his expression. She turned her head to look at Sanson and narrowed her black jade-like eyes. Sanson, what do you think is over there? Ah. Where? Sanson curiously followed her gaze and looked back. Chu Luiyue approached with a smile. Look at the large area by the stream. Doesn't it look like spirit melting grass? Sanson suddenly quivered and realized what she meant. She quickly raised her hands and begged for mercy. Master. I really didn't lie to you on purpose. I've always been exploited by the people of the Black Sword sect, so I wanted to struggle a little. So, you lied to them and said that there wasn't much left and that you really couldn't take it out. He had almost fooled her as well. Chu Luiyue knew Sanson very well. Of course, she didn't really think that Sanson didn't have any stock at all, but she didn't expect, how could he be so exaggerated? This place was filled with treasures that couldn't be found outside. He actually had the nerve to complain about being poor. Seeing that she wasn't really angry, Sanson breathed a sigh of relief and complained again. Master, I'm doing this for your sake. Think about it, these were originally all yours. Now that they've taken so much away for no reason, my heart aches for you. I thought that by dragging it out, they could restrain themselves a little, but I didn't expect. He didn't expect that not only did those bastards not lower their standards, they even increased the amount. It was too much. Chu Luiyue glanced at him and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't know about the situation here before. Wasn't he the one who was truly heartbroken? But according to Sanson's character, this was indeed enough to make his heart bleed. 3 times. Chu Luiyue's words were concise and comprehensive. Sanson immediately expressed his loyalty. Master, you're treating me like an outsider. Since these are mine, then they're equivalent to yours. Don't you have as much as you want? Chu Luiyue's lips curled up. After not seeing him for a few years, Sanson's mouth had become better at talking. But now that she was in a good mood, she didn't want to argue with him so much. She calmed herself down and looked at the small space again. It was really, compared to these, what were the numbers in Sanson's account book? Those people who came with you before, they all know about the situation here. Chu Luiyue asked. Sanson revealed a sly smile. Master, you don't have to worry about this. Although many people have followed me in, they haven't seen the real appearance of this place. Every time I bring them here, I specially separate a small area for them to see. As he spoke, he gestured with his hand. It was only a little. Anyway, everything here was under his control. Naturally, he could do whatever he wanted. Chu Luiyue looked at him with admiration. When it came to money, Sanson was always reliable. How could there be such a small space here? After confirming that the others didn't know the real situation here, Chu Luiyue was much more relieved. On second thought, she fell into even deeper doubt. There must be a reason for such a blessed place to exist. It was no exaggeration to say that Chu Luiyue thought that this place was not worse than Lingxiao College and Yuntian Tower. Most importantly, almost no one had set foot in this place. Everything, whether it was the energy of heaven and earth, or the treasures of heaven and earth, they were all the most abundant and abundant. Sanson scratched his head. I really don't know. After all, it was a coincidence that he broke into this place. In the year or two here, he had thought about this question countless times, but in the end, he couldn't get any reliable answer. Over time, he stopped thinking about it. Anyway, sitting in this small space was enough to satisfy him. Chu Luiyue looked up. There was a faint greenish-white color above. Except for the absence of the sun, moon, and clouds, it was almost the same as the real sky outside. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it a strong medicinal fragrance. Logically speaking, such a small space should have been artificially created. But, what kind of person would have such a heavenly ability? Chu Luiyue muttered in a low voice. She looked at Rongxiu. Rongxiu, other than this, do you think there will be? Yes. Rongxiu nodded affirmatively. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why are you so sure? Rongxiu chuckled and gently tapped her forehead. There are so many treasures of heaven and earth in here. You can guess how much energy of heaven and earth is needed to supply them. If this small space is really completely enclosed, how can there be such a scenery here? He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Perhaps. There's an even bigger surprise waiting for you. Who knows? Digression, there are more updates in the evening. The time is uncertain. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1845. An even bigger surprise. Chu Luiyue almost couldn't imagine what a surprise that was even more amazing than all of this would look like. Sanson, since you're the owner of this small space, you should know this place the best. Chu Luiyue looked at Sanson. Have you found anything unusual around here? Sanson shook his head. No, every time he came here, he was basically picking herbs. As for the others, he had checked, but he found nothing. Master, Your Highness, since you're here, why don't I show you around? Maybe you'll find something. Since they were here, they naturally had to take a good look. Chu Luiyue nodded. She was also curious about this place. Let's go and see how many treasures you have in this small space. The small space was full of energy of heaven and earth. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but say as they walked. It would be great if we could cultivate here. Sanson chuckled when he heard that. You're right, Master. Even I, who have been lazing around for the past few days, come here a few times a month, and I feel that my cultivation speed has increased a lot compared to before. This was not an exaggeration, but the truth. Chu Luiyue could tell that his abilities had improved tremendously from the moment she met him at Peach Blossom Dock. At first, she didn't take it to heart. Later, she thought that he was busy with business all day long. How could he have time to focus on cultivation? Needless to say, he didn't care enough about cultivation. When he was busy, he probably couldn't care about anything else. Even so, his cultivation base had still improved by quite a bit. Now that she thought about it, it was this small space. The few of them walked inside. Chu Luiyue realized that this place was bigger than she had expected. The mountains were continuous, the forests were lush, and the streams were gurgling. Precious herbs that were rare in the outside world could be seen everywhere here. If an outsider were to find out about this scene, it would likely cause a great chaos. The three of them weren't slow, but it still took them a long time to patrol around. This place is almost half the size of Lingxiao College. Chu Luiyue sighed. One had to know that Lingxiao College was the top college in the entire Divine Ruins world. Whether it was in terms of scale or other aspects, they were definitely not inferior to those first-rate families and sections. And this was just a small space in Sanson's hand. More importantly, this place was filled with extremely precious natural treasures, while Lingxiao College's Medicine Wind Valley was at most 1/10 the size of the entire college. Based on this calculation, the area and quantity of medicinal herbs stored in this small space were several times that of the Medicine Wind Valley. It was simply astounding. If I could use this place as a long-term training ground, Chu Luiyue murmured. Sanson hurriedly waved his hand. Master, I'm afraid this won't do. Seeing that Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu were looking at her, Sanson sighed and explained helplessly, do you remember that I told you before that I can bring a few people in and out of this place every time? Chu Luiyue nodded. I remember. Didn't you also say that the number of people you can bring in is determined by your strength? It's more than that. The length of time outsiders stay here is also closely related to this. In short, the stronger I am, the more people I can bring in and the longer they stay here. If there are too many people or they stay here for too long, then Basically, it will be difficult for me to hold on. Hearing Sanson's words, Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. After a long while, Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly. There are quite a lot of rules in this small space. Chu Luiyue also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If that was the case, then her idea just now really had no possibility of being realized. In that case, you can't be considered to have complete control of this small space. To a large extent, it was Sanson who was suppressed by this small space. Sanson nodded calmly. Yes. He had also thought of working hard to cultivate to better control this small space, but later found that it was too difficult. Cultivation was too difficult. Chu Luiyue looked at him speechlessly. She knew that she couldn't count on him at this time. She dismissed the idea in her heart, but she still felt a little regretful. The locations that Sanson had provided her before were not as good as this one. Unfortunately, Rong Xiu, did you find anything just now? Chu Luiyue asked. Rong Xiu's eyes narrowed slightly and he shook his head. This small space is self-contained and has already recognized an owner. It's not easy to spy on it. Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart. In fact, this was already within her expectations. Because she didn't find anything herself. Rong Xiu's strength was higher than hers. If even he said so, then it would be difficult. Her biggest hope was probably still on Sanson. Chu Luiyue's gaze fell on Sanson again. Sanson trembled all over. Every time his master looked at him with this gaze, he knew that it was not a good thing. Buzz. A slight buzzing sound suddenly came from inside his body. Chu Luiyue lifted her feet and was about to leave. She noticed this movement and suddenly froze. This fluctuation came from the black shield in her body. Noticing the change in Chu Luiyue's expression, Sanson asked curiously. Master, what's wrong? Weren't you planning to leave? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. A ray of black light flashed. That black shield suddenly appeared in her hand. Seeing her move, Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a dark light. Master. Sanson was about to ask again, but suddenly saw that the black shield in Chu Luiyue's hand suddenly overflowed with flowing light. The faint luster was sacred and flawless. An almost suffocating pressure gradually surged out from the black shield. Sanson stood nearby and couldn't help but change his expression immediately, and hurriedly took 2 steps back. At that moment, just looking at the light on the shield, he actually had the urge to kneel down. The power on the shield was really too terrifying. Chu Liuyue's eyes stared at the black shield in her hand. The luster flowed silently, like a river spreading on the black ground. Vaguely, it seemed to be forming a wonderful pattern, and also seemed to be washing away the rust on the shield. Crack. A slight cracking sound was heard. Then, a piece of rust the size of a fingernail fell down. The luster quickly covered it. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She had this black shield for many years, but she had never seen such a situation. The shield that was once incomparably hard and could easily withstand countless powerful attacks actually took the initiative to peel off a layer of rust. At the same time, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth suddenly rushed over. An energy vortex came from the sky and landed on Chu Liuyue's body. To be precise, it landed on the black shield in her hand. Crack. Another piece of rust fell down. Digression, there will be another update later. Today, I've made up for the 10th update on the 12th. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Network. Chapter 1846. As this piece of rust peeled off, the black shield began to devour the surrounding energy at an even faster speed. The aura surged and rolled up the corner of Chu Liuyue's skirt. A few strands of hair fell from her forehead, but she didn't even blink her eyes. She was still staring at the black shield. This time, she seemed to be able to see a brilliant light inside after the rust had fallen off. It was as if the dark sky was torn apart by the light, bright and dazzling. It was so bright that no one dared to look at it directly. Unfortunately, all of this was just a flash. Chu Liyue only caught a glimpse of it. Before she could take a closer look, the light flowing on the shield had already covered it again. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but Chu Liyue suddenly felt that the black shield had become a lot heavier. Unknowingly, there seemed to be a pressure on her body. However, this didn't make her feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, the force in her body seemed to be attracted by some kind of force and began to flow quickly. Boom! A strange explosion was heard. Sanson subconsciously looked up and suddenly opened his eyes wide in shock. Right above them, the enchantment in the sky was suddenly burning. At a glance, it almost made people think that a hole had been broken in the sky. The strangest thing was that the direction of the burning flame was hanging upside down. The tip of the flame was clearly in the direction of the few people, and there was a faint tendency for it to spread. In Sanson's eyes, the burning blue flame was reflected. It was jumping around happily like a fairy. His eyelids twitched violently. What the hell was going on? Why did the enchantment suddenly break without any reason? And it was burning. Master! He anxiously called out to Chu Liyue. If this commotion really caused a ruckus, what if it burned down the whole place? Boss Sanson. At this moment, a deep voice suddenly came from outside. Sanson was shocked. Someone is here. Under normal circumstances, no one would come to Qingshui Cliff. It was obvious who would come to look for him at this time. He looked up again. The blue flame that broke the enchantment seemed to be burning more fiercely. Unfortunately, Chu Liyue's attention seemed to be focused on the black shield at this time and couldn't hear what he said at all. Sanson called out twice and looked at Rongxiu for help. Your Highness, you must help. If someone sees this situation, I'm afraid. Boss Sanson. Are you there? Not getting a response, the person outside spoke again. Rongxiu looked at Chu Liyue. At this moment, her situation was obviously a little different. Although her eyes were fixed on the black shield, if one looked closely, they would find that her vision was illusory. She was not looking at anything, as if she was deep in thought. Or she was looking at something through the black shield. Rong Xiu directly reached out and pulled Chu Liyue's wrist. Of Sansan. Almost at the same time, a ray of light on the black shield suddenly floated up and fell on Rong Xiu's hand. Swish! A burn mark suddenly appeared on his white and slender fingers. Master! Your Highness! Sansan was shocked and wanted to go forward. Rong Xiu's expression didn't change and he didn't stop walking. He firmly held her wrist. The temperature on his palm went from the skin to the bottom of his heart. Chu Liyue suddenly looked up and came back to her senses. The ray of light quickly flew back to the black shield and quickly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, the whole shield became dim again. Almost at the same time, the blue flame that was burning upside down in the sky was extinguished with a puff sound and completely disappeared. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Dong! Chu Liyue's hand loosened and the black shield was inserted into the ground. Rong Xiu, I just saw. Chu Liyue was about to say something when she saw Rong Xiu's injured finger from the corner of her eye. Was this caused by her? Chu Liyue frowned slightly. She didn't know what happened just now. She seemed to have fallen into a very subtle state. Everything around her seemed to have become illusory. Only the black shield in front of her. When Rong Xiu pulled her, she knew it was him and didn't have any intention to attack him. However, she did not expect that the black shield would unleash such a terrifying attack with just a thought from her. Now it was just an accident. If she wanted to fight, it's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly and raised his chin slightly. Someone is outside. Chu Liyue insisted on holding his hand and checking it. After confirming that it was just scalded, she was relieved. Boss Sansan isn't here. I don't think so. Didn't many people see him come in with his men before? It's not even noon. They shouldn't have come out yet. Shout again. Seeing that Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu were fine, Sansan's heart was finally at ease, but it was still beating fast. Almost, Sansan looked at Chu Liyue and the black shield in front of her with some lingering fear and reminded her. Master, this thing, you should put it away first. In the outside world, it always felt quite scary. Chu Liyue was a little helpless and a little amused, but she still picked it up. When she took it back, she took a closer look. The place where the rust had been peeled off returned to its dark appearance. It looked like there was nothing special except for a shallow dent. She pursed her lips and put it away. Sansan then turned and walked outside. Chu Liyue looked at Rong Xiu and saw the red mark on his finger. She felt guilty and held his hand to her lips and blew on it. Rong Xiu's eyes darkened. Does it hurt? Chu Liyue asked. Even though this burn wasn't serious to Rong Xiu, her heart still ached when she saw it. What's more, it was caused by her carelessness. Rong Xiu grabbed her hand and tightly held it as they walked forward. It doesn't hurt. He went back absent-mindedly. What he was thinking about was not pain. Digression, it's time to sleep. End of the 12th mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1847. Sansan walked to the edge of the barrier and turned around to look at the two of them. Chu Liyue nodded slightly without any change in her expression. Sansan then stretched out his hand, and a cluster of blue flames suddenly surged out. It covered the barrier. Perhaps it was because the scene just now had left a deep impression on him, but when Sansan made his move, his heart was still hanging in the air. When he saw that the flames were burning as usual and the barrier was successfully opened, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it seemed that Master's move just now did not have much of an impact on this small space. Otherwise, it would be difficult for them to get out today. If they met those people outside, they would not know how to explain it. Sanson composed himself and walked out of the gap in the barrier. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao followed closely behind. After the three of them disappeared, the barrier closed again. Peace was restored in the small space. The moment Sanson came out, he saw a few people waiting outside. They were dressed in black robes with a pattern of two swords cupping the moon embroidered on their left chest. It was the Ink Sword sect. Moreover, Sanson knew the leader of these people. Master Mo Lin, why are you here? When he raised his head, Sanson had already put on an eager and enthusiastic smile and walked over quickly. Mo Lin's position in the Ink Sword sect was not low. He was Mo Yun's right-hand man. There were many things that he handled on Mo Yun's behalf. Therefore, when Sanson saw him, his attitude was also very enthusiastic. Mo Lin and the others were impatient from waiting. When they saw Sanson come out, their expressions eased up. Boss San. Mo Lin walked forward. He looked to be in his 30s. He was thin and tall, and his facial features were ordinary. Only his eyes were sharp and cold, revealing a sense of shrewdness and viciousness. We called you a few times just now, but we didn't hear any response. We thought you weren't inside. As he spoke, the corners of his mouth curled up, but the corners of his eyes and brows were still cold. Sanson did not dare to underestimate him in the slightest, and hurriedly explained with a smile, Master Mo Lin, I'm really sorry. I was busy processing some herbs inside and did not hear your voice. After hearing it, I hurriedly came out. Please forgive me. Mo Lin sized him up. Sanson's round face was rosy, and there were beads of sweat on her forehead. She was panting slightly, and it seemed that she had indeed come out in a hurry. However, he didn't know that Sanson was like this because he was shocked by his master just now. Seeing Sanson like this, the dissatisfaction in Molin's heart dissipated, and the coldness in his eyes gradually faded. Hee, third boss, don't be nervous. This time, we came too suddenly. If we have disturbed you, we are really sorry. Sanson had an earnest smile on his face, but in his heart, he had already cursed the other party's 18 generations of ancestors. Embarrassed? He did not see the slightest bit of embarrassment on the other party's face. If he really didn't want to disturb them, he shouldn't have appeared at Qingshui Cliff at this time. Furthermore, she shouldn't have kept calling his name, calling it endlessly. He had already done what he shouldn't have done. If he were to say, sorry, now, it would be like taking off his pants to fart, an unnecessary move. Lord Mo Lin is busy every day. How did you find the time to come here today? Is there something urgent? In the end, Sanson still wanted to make a living, so he spoke very politely. Molin said, actually, it's not a big deal. It's just that our people discovered. Before he finished speaking, his gaze focused on Rong Xiao and Chu Luiyue, who had just come out from behind Sanson. These two are, a hint of suspicion appeared in his eyes. Sanson immediately chuckled. These two are the servants of our medicine shop. It's normal that Lord Mo Lin doesn't recognize them. When they came out today, Chu Luiyue and Sanson had specially dressed up. At least from the outside, they were indeed ordinary. Molin frowned. Normally, Sanson would bring her entourage over, so there was nothing strange about this. However, for some reason, he felt that these two servants looked a little unusual. As for what was wrong, he couldn't tell. He looked at them suspiciously. Sanson took a step forward, intentionally or unintentionally blocking his line of sight. He smiled and rubbed his hands. I'm really sorry, Lord Mo Lin. These two servants of mine are new and don't know the rules. If they have offended you, please forgive them. Haha. Seeing that there was nothing suspicious about the two, Molen retracted his gaze. They were just two servants. It was not worth it to waste time and energy. They came here today for another purpose. Boss Sanson, actually, we came here this time to ask for your help. Sanson was stunned. Lord Molen, please speak. Molen raised his finger and pointed at a mountain peak not far away. A few of us are trapped in Lan Qingfeng and can't come out for a while. I'm afraid we'll have to trouble Boss Sanson to go and help us. As soon as he said this, Sanson's eyes widened in surprise. He raised his finger and pointed at his nose. Me? Their people were trapped in Lan Qingfeng. They could have gone to save them themselves. Why did they come to him? Was Molen's brain kicked by a donkey? Chu Luyue and Rong Xiao stood silently at the side. They tacitly reduced their presence. It was just that they naturally heard these words clearly. Hearing this, Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. There were many people in the Ink Sword sect who were stronger than Sanson. There were only two possibilities for them to come to Sanson because of this. First, they were just looking for an excuse to lure Sanson to Lan Qingfeng. However, this excuse was too lame. The people of the Ink Sword sect did not seem to be like this. Second, they were really here to ask for Sanson's help, and only Sanson could help with this. If that was the case, then the situation was very delicate. Sanson's mind turned quickly and he reacted quickly. No problem. Since Lord Molen personally asked, Sanson will naturally not refuse. How can I refuse? Lan Qingfeng, right? Let's go now. Molen suddenly raised his hand to stop him. Wait. Sanson's heart skipped a beat. What's wrong? Molen raised his chin. Boss Sanson can just follow us. As for these two, he meant that he wanted them to stay. Sanson was in a difficult position. He was really in a difficult position. With the small space as a bargaining chip, he was not afraid that the other party would do anything to him. However, if he really went alone and left his master and his highness here, how could that be? What if something happened? Lord Molen, these two servants are my people. If I leave them here alone, I will not be at ease. Why don't you bring them along? I promise that they will not cause you any trouble. Molen suddenly narrowed his eyes. They are just two servants. Why are you so nervous, Boss Sanson? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1848. Sanson heaved a sigh. You don't understand. Master Molen, in your eyes, they are just two insignificant servants. But to me, they are extremely important. You also know that it is not easy for me to run this medicine store. These manservants were all carefully selected by me before I personally taught them how to identify medicinal herbs. I have spent a lot of effort on this. If something were to happen, my loss. Sanson sighed. Back then, when I first came to Peach Blossom Dock, it was so difficult. Seeing that Sanson was about to start complaining from the beginning, Molen's mouth twitched. All right. Since third boss has said so, then let's bring the two of them along. If they were obedient, it would be fine. But if they were to cause trouble. In any case, they had plenty of ways to deal with it quietly. He had been dealing with third boss for a long time. The most unbearable thing for him was his nagging. Now that the situation was urgent, there was no need to waste time on such trivial matters. Sanson was overjoyed and very grateful. Thank you, Master Molen, for your understanding. Molen was a little impatient. If the vice sect leader had not specifically instructed him to be polite, he would not have been so patient. Let's go. He did not look at the two people behind him. He turned around and went straight to Langfang Peak. Sanson coughed. Let's go too. The group moved very quickly. In about 15 minutes, they arrived at Langfang Peak. Mo Lin stood in the air and pointed ahead. Third boss, they are trapped there. Sanson looked over and indeed saw a few figures halfway up the mountain. It was just that the dense forest blocked most of his vision. He could only roughly see, but was unable to clearly see the situation. This Langfang Peak, there seems to be something wrong with them. How are they trapped? Sanson asked with a puzzled face. He looked at those people. They did not seem to be injured. Couldn't they just go down the mountain? Mo Lin frowned slightly. Third boss, take a closer look. Sanson saw his serious expression and felt that something was wrong, so she took 2 steps forward and looked at it from a different angle. This time, he could finally see the situation on the mountainside clearly. A trace of doubt flashed across his face. Then, as if he had guessed something, he looked at Mo Lin in disbelief. Lord Molin, that is, Chu Luiyue looked up slightly. She and Rong Xiao were sitting at the back, so they couldn't see the situation clearly. However, from the position beside Sanson, he could still spy on some things. She looked over. The Azure Peak was a very ordinary mountain. There was nothing special about it at first glance. Those people stayed at a relatively flat area halfway up the mountain. For some reason, they kept walking back and forth, but didn't go anywhere else. From the looks of it, it was as if he was really trapped in that area. However, there was no barrier or anything like that around them. Look at their feet. A cold and deep voice suddenly entered his ears. However, Rong Xiao used his force to turn it into a voice and spoke to her alone. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and she looked in the direction he said. Then, she found something fishy. On the ground in front of them, there seemed to be a blue light flickering. However, because they were quite far away and their vision was blocked, they couldn't see it clearly. However, that color looked a little familiar. This morning, they came to the Azure Peak to train. Everything was fine at first, but for some reason, something like this suddenly appeared on the mountain and trapped them there, unable to come out. After we got the news that they were asking for help, we rushed over. Molin gave a concise explanation. Just now, we went closer to take a closer look. That thing seems to be related to Third Boss. So, we specially asked Third Boss to come over and see if he can help. Although Mo Lin's tone was very calm, Sanson's hands were sweaty after hearing it. He was extremely nervous. Although it was just a glance, he saw clearly that the blue light that trapped them on the mountainside was actually a line of fire. Moreover, it was exactly the same as the blue flame in his body. Third Boss. Seeing that Sanson didn't move, Mo Lin urged him. Sanson came back to his senses and wiped the sweat on his forehead. Master Mo Lin, no matter what, I must tell you first, I really don't know what's going on at the Azure Peak. Previously, we had been staying in that small space. How could we have the time and energy to come here? Mo Lin raised his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say more. We all believe Third Boss on this. Previously, the few of them had already said that the situation appeared suddenly and shouldn't have anything to do with Third Boss. So, Third Boss, you don't have to worry. We definitely won't blame you for this for no reason. Moreover, we still need your help. Mo Lin's face was expressionless, and it was impossible to tell whether his words were true or false. Sanson gritted his teeth. These things really couldn't be explained clearly in a few sentences. It seemed that only when those people were brought out would there be a chance to clarify. Then, I'll go take a look first. As Sanson spoke, he walked in that direction. After taking 2 steps, he hurriedly stopped and turned back. Everyone, please come over. With me around, I can at least ensure the safety of the few of you. If we get closer, we might be able to find some clues. Mo Lin did not intend to just stand there and watch. Hearing this, he nodded his head and immediately followed. The other people from the Black Sword sect also followed. Sanson's gaze fell on Chu Luyue and Rongxiu. He seemed to inadvertently urge them. You guys shouldn't be left behind. With that, he took a deep breath and turned to head towards the middle of the mountain. The closer they got, the clearer the scene became. When they passed through the dense forest, they finally saw the scene in front of them. Even though he had expected it, Chu Luyue was still shocked. That blue flame was actually buried under the thin layer of mountain rocks and was burning silently. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.